Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to more Mushoku Tensei. I don't know why I said it like that, but you know what? Damn it, I'm here for it. Shit, I forgot to grab water before. I'm dumb. Okay. Uh, yeah. Hang on 1 second. Wow, this is really tangled. Why am I even wearing this? I guess so. I'll hear the notifications. Just kind of all over the place. Let me go get these water real quick. All right, got water. Come hither. Yeah, come hither. Come on, come on. There's a good boy. How you feeling? You good? Yeah. Oh, look at him. Look at his chops. Yes. You want hugs? Hugs. Oh, hugs. Hugs. Ready? Go. Good boy. Good boy. All right. He is good pets. Good loving. I know. You don't want to stick around here. Hi. There we go. All right. There we go. All right. You ready to head? Okay. There we are. Got all that out of the way. Goodness me. All right. So, couple of important notes before we get started, at least ones that I think are pretty important. Over the last 3 weeks, I have lost 8 pounds. A lot of that is diet, but the other half is also, of course, exercise. And these streams are a source of exercise. So please post exercises as channel points. I know a lot of you have a lot of channel points, so go ahead and spend them as much as you can. I will be doing them after each chapter, and we're going to be doing 4 chapters today. We're going to do 7, 8, 9, and 10 because there's 14 chapters in this volume entirely, and I'd want to make sure that we get as much down as we can. On the days that I have off, which are typically Tuesdays and Thursdays, or at least I have more free time, uh, I will be going to the mall and walking around for at least an hour, getting about 2.5 miles in. I do at least 3 or 4 times out of the week, 4 days out of the week, I go out and walk Toby for about a half an hour. But walking him is not the same as like walking for exercise. It's a whole different thing. And about an hour of walking for me is somewhere around 2.5 to 3 miles. So that's good and that'll help. So, yes. Remember, I'm only going to do 40 at a time for the end of each chapter. So don't just spam one thing. All right. And we do have people tallying it all up, and I appreciate it. But just know that I want you to actually send the exercises during a chapter so I can do them at the end of a chapter. If you post them at the end of the chapter, that's not going to count to the exercises that I'll be doing right then. That will carry over to the next chapter. So it's honestly better if you send those out when I'm reading. That's the important part. Okay. Now, to work on other stuff. As you guys can see, new shirt. I had to go out and get new shirt, new pants, new socks, a whole bunch of stuff, all new stuff. So I'm actually like not wearing pajamas. I'm wearing proper freaking clothing. So yeah, I got a fresh set of jeans, 2 sets of jeans, and then I'm hoping I'll be able to do some more stuff. I may have to put up like a clothing allowance, get $50 up for more pants because I need more pants. I only have 2 pairs of jeans that fit, and even my old stuff kind of has holes in it in places, and I had to get thrown out. So aside from like my dress kind of pants, the only other stuff that I have that would fit would be a set of shorts. And I want to explain something. It's not my waist. My waist isn't the problem. I have to get size 38 wide pants because my thighs are a little too chunky, and it's hard to walk around in tight fitting clothes for me. So I'm glad to see you working out and such proud. Yay! All right. But yeah, they're too tight and it hurts to walk around. Yeah, I got thick thighs and I need to get rid of those. So the more help, I honestly just sweat and like proper. Do you guys want to hear what I had for breakfast? It's a weird thing. Well, for some of you it might be. For some of you it might not. I didn't have like a bowl of oatmeal or an egg sandwich or like a fried egg sandwich like I usually do. And by the way, my fried egg sandwiches are just a fried egg, right? So I crack the egg, I break the yolk, I let it cook on one side, I flip it, done. Uh, Flip it, let it finish cooking, and done. I put that on a very thin, low-calorie tortilla. We're done with processed cheese. That's out, gone. No more of that crap processed cheese. We have actual cheese. We're slicing cheese. Actual real sliced cheese costs a lot more, but it's better for you. It's like $8 for some of that pre-sliced cheese, and we should just get a cheese slicer thing that we can just and get a nice thin slice of cheese. But yeah, if you know where we can find those, let me know. You only had cookies despite waking up before noon. Gotcha. I put one of those down, and then like a small, like about that much dollop of mayo, like maybe about the size of like my eye, not the full eye, just the blue. Um, but anyway, I have one of those, and that's usually breakfast in the morning for me. Today it wasn't. Today I had half pears. I poured the syrup out, and I took 2 half pears and had one spoonful of um I had one spoonful of cottage cheese, and I placed that in the center, and that's what I ate. That was my breakfast this morning: 2 half pears and some cottage cheese. And you know what? It was good. It was pretty good. It's a thing that my grandma used to make, and I miss it. So we got some more. I still have another can of sliced pears. I had some last night. It was really good, and I wanted to have some more this morning. And so that was my morning thing. I had a bit of water. This has been in the fridge, so it's cold. It's nice, good cold water. I got the good Rimuru Tempest mug there going for us. Little coffee cup. And all right, so all of that. And then well, something that I can use to slice cheese that isn't just a knife, you know? Something that I can use to just cleanly slice it and not have to worry about spending half an hour with a knife. or possibly like having to wash a knife over and over because I'm just using it for cheese. Unless we're just getting a cheese knife. Mm-hmm. Uh, I wonder if there is such a thing. Let me look it up. Uh, yeah, there's a thing to yeah, there's things that you can use to just slice cheese. They're like $7.99 on Amazon. Let's see. Brand's adjustable cheese slicer. Yeah, dude. It's a real thing. It works. $7.99. Dope. I'll add that later. New Spy Family came out. Good episode. Oh, man. Spy Family, pardon the saying, but it's killing it. It's common with shredders. Uh, I just thought it was for vegetables. Wait, what? We don't. We have a cheese grater, not a shredder. Um. So yeah. But yeah, you can get a cheese slicer. Yeah, that's a real thing. I'm gonna put that in my. I'm gonna go into my cart and add that to the cart. There we go. Dope. That way it's sitting there. I will not have a flat cap by Monday. Even if I were to buy one on Sunday, it wouldn't get here in time. And I'm gonna have to wait to buy it on Wednesday anyway, so it'll be probably 2 weeks. Maybe next Saturday I will have a flat cap, but until then, you still have to stare at the shininess of my bald head. Apologies. You forgot that slicer is a word, or cheese slicer? Anyway, that's been going on. So yeah, I had those pears. It's really good. It's nice. And then later, I do have some snack food, which is just raw almonds, not salted. So got a little bit of that going for me. I've been munching on those. Been doing pretty good. Really looking forward to it. Grater. Okay. Not shredder. Gotcha. Yeah. And Shredder is a bad guy on Ninja Turtles. But yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. If you have not been checking out Skeleton Knight, highly encourage you to do so. Skeleton Knight in Another World is up on Crunchyroll right now. Alrighty. And the cheese shredder is so you can cut a pretty decent. Like when we use the knife, we tend to cut like too much in one direction, or we get one side is too chunky while the other is too thin. It's really, that's why I wanted to get a cheese slicer so it's pretty even. All right. That having been said, let's go ahead and jump into it. We got 4 chapters to do today, and I'm looking forward to all the exercise you'll be throwing my way. Also, I want you to know Russian twists are getting replaced with toe touches. I lay down and raise my shoulders off the ground, and I do toe touches. It still works my sides, but I think it's more effective. All right. It hasn't been updated yet, but that's what, or it's not toe touches, it's heel touches. Sorry, heel touches, and that's what I'm doing for those. Now, if you want me to do some of the exercises in this thing, if you want some Crusader exercises, you're gonna have to donate $5 to the cause. And I mean, well, donate $5. You could either donate $5 or you can um gift sub, prime sub, or just tier 1 sub, because that's basically $5. So while making me do exercises is free, making me do it wearing that stupid thing, I ain't doing that for free. So that is the majority of it. Good water. Good water. All right. I'm going to pour another cup and then we will begin. There we are. Are you kidding? The first line is literally okay. Well, flex those commercial skills, man. All right. Chapter 7, The Third Turning Point. Life comes at you fast. For other times, use MasterCard. That's what that feels like. It feels like a credit card commercial. Life comes at you fast. For the rest, use MasterCard, Discover, Visa, whatever card they're paying me to tell you to use. That's what it sounds like when I read that. Because I've read so much of that crap. All right. Life comes at you fast sometimes. I was doing my usual training routine one pleasant summer morning, feeling good about things in general. I hadn't seen Batty Gaddy around for months, but wasn't too concerned. The man was impulsive at the best of times, so there wasn't much point worrying about him. That was when Lynn Lee said, always said at least. And it had proven to be true so far. When I finished up and went back into the house, I found Aisha and Sylphie in the hallway with serious expressions on their face. They turned to look at me as I stepped in the door. Oh, Rudy? Something about the atmosphere in here was making me nervous. Did we have a problem or something? Sylphie said Sylphie, scratching at the back of her ears with an awkward smile. Wow, this is making me more nervous than I expected. There's no reason to hesitate, Sylphie, said Aisha. Go on, be brave. My wife stepped forward after a moment's hesitation. She crossed her hands in front of her stomach and spoke. Well, Rudy, it's actually been 2 months now since my last, her last? Oh. Oh, wow! And, well, I haven't been feeling so well lately and was starting to wonder. There we go. I couldn't help myself from staring at Sylphie's stomach. It didn't look any different at the moment. Was this really happening? So I went with Aisha to the neighborhood doctor and they said, congratulations. Oh. Oh. My voice was trembling, so were my hands, and my legs for that matter. Congratulations? She was pregnant? We were actually going to have a kid. This wasn't a dream, right? An experimental pinch of my cheek made me wince. So much for that theory. I swallowed loudly. Right, of course. Why wouldn't she be pregnant? I was a man who could make things happen. When I really set my mind to it, this was always been part of the plan. I just hadn't been expecting it to happen so quickly, since everyone said elves had a hard time getting pregnant. I was a little startled. That was all. Rudy, any thoughts? Sylphie was looking at me anxiously. I wasn't sure what to say, though. This was all so sudden. Can I, touch your stomach? Huh? Sure, go ahead. I reached down and stroked Sylphie's belly. It was still slender, with no additional fat that I could feel. Her skin was warm to the touch and surprisingly soft. The same as always. In other words, but, oh, the same was always. Good gracious, hang on. The same as always, in other words. But when I focused But when I focused closely, I felt like I could feel a slight hint of a bump. That was probably just my imagination, right? The kid wouldn't be that big yet. Right. Our kid's in here. When I spoke those words out loud, I felt a sudden surge of emotion building up inside me. What was this feeling? I had to repress the urge to start shouting incoherently. I had a kid on the way. I was going to be a dad. It didn't feel real yet, but it still made me incredibly happy. Was happy even the right term? The word felt so inadequate. What's I feeling right now? You even put this into words? Brother dear, isn't there anything you'd like to say to your wife? Aisha's words snapped me back to reality. Muh, something I needed to say. Like, what? Congratulations? No, that can't be it. Maybe I should thank her. Yeah, that sounds better. Thank you, Sophie. Huh? Sophie smiled, but she looked a little puzzled. Had I guessed wrong? What was the answer then? I searched my memory for a hint. What had Paul said to Zenith when he. Back when we found out Norn was on the way? Something like, well done, right? Or maybe nice job? I didn't like those options very much, though. Did he think women only got pregnant when they tried hard or something? Maybe. Maybe he was that stupid. Pregnant, huh? Yeah, Sophie's pregnant. I got this sweet, beautiful girl pregnant. Me of all people. The more I thought about it, the more my emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I was actually starting to tear up. I'm sorry. I don't, think I know what to say. Sorry, Sophie. Rudy? Instead of continuing, I'd thrown my arms around Sophie. I wanted to lift her up into the air and spin her around a few times for good measure, but this wasn't the time for that. She had a baby in her belly. I needed to be very, very gentle with her. You did want children pretty badly, didn't you? My wife wrapped her arms around me as well and started to pat me on the back. Yeah, I'd say he wanted kids. Just look at that. That right there says it all. Dude, he's freaking crying in happiness. Of course he wanted kids. Oh, okay. Gotcha. I was like, what is going on with that? And then I know now what. I gave her one more gentle squeeze and then finally released her. Stepping back, I stared down into her eyes. I could see my face reflected in them, and it was a pretty sight. I had tears running down my cheeks. Sylphie closed her eyes. I kissed her and stroked her hair, enjoying the softness of her lips. This was what love felt like, wasn't it? Ahem. Aisha cleared her throat, reminding me that we weren't alone in the room. I'd started groping Sylvie's breast and butt without even realizing it. Brother dear, we need to be gentle with the lady of the house for a while. You're going to need to refrain from intercourse for the moment. She's right. Bad, Rudy is bad. No matter how lovable my wife was, I needed to control myself from now on. Then again, she was less than 2 months pregnant, right? And we'd be doing it every 3 days up till now. Probably wouldn't hurt to keep going just a little longer. Nope, nope. Keep it together, man. Right. Of course. Aisha smiled and lifted the hem of her skirt slightly upward. If you're desperate, I'm always available to pick up the slack. Not a chance in hell, kiddo. She pouted a little at that. It was nice of her to offer and all, but even putting all the moral issues aside, I wasn't attracted to her. That suited me fine anyway. The last thing I needed was to destroy my marriage by messing with the maid. Well then, brother dear, I'm going to go inform Princess Ariel of this development. I expect Miss Sylphie will need to put her work on hold for some time after all. That hadn't even occurred to me, but she was right. You wouldn't want a pregnant woman working as a bodyguard. Sylvie was going to need a leave of absence. I'll go, I said. I should really explain the situation myself. Aisha sighed at me. Rudius, you really need to stay with Sylphie for the moment. You've got lots to talk about, remember? Do we? Oh, right, I guess we do. This kind of changes everything after all. With that settled, I'll be going now. Right, okay. Thanks, Aisha. My little sister left the house in high spirits, leaving me and Sylphie behind by ourselves. Hold on. I've still got some leftover almond in my teeth. All right. Good. Man, this chair is noisy today. There we go. Mm-hmm. I cautiously reached out. Oh, after a few minutes, the two of us were sitting next to each other on the sofa. I cautiously reached out to take Sylphie's hand. She squeezed mine back and leaned her head against my shoulder. Neither of us said anything for a while. I wasn't sure where to begin, honestly. The only words that were coming to me were variations of I'll take responsibility for my own actions. But we were already married, so that didn't make much sense. Um, Sylphie? Yes, Rudy? I know this might be tough, but we'll do it together. Well, I think I'll be doing most of the work. Laughing softly, Sylphie laid down on the couch and put her head in my lap. I used my free hand to stroke her head and rub behind her ears. Hey, Rudy? Yeah? You want a boy or a girl? The question took me by surprise. I'd almost forgotten babies came in two varieties. I mean, not that we really get to choose, Sylphie added, smiling gently. Which would be better? Maybe a boy would be nice, just to have an heir to the family. But it wasn't like I was the head of some feudal clan or anything. We could pass down everything to a girl just as easily. Not that we even had much of a fortune to be inherited at the moment. Back in my old life, I probably would have said, a girl, with a creepy grin on my face. Maybe even suggested that we take pictures of her every single day to record her growth into adulthood. What a very foolish man I used to be. Right now, though, I couldn't find any reason to prefer one over the other. As long as it was a healthy, happy kid, I'd be satisfied either way. You know, Rudy, I'm kind of relieved. Why? It feels like really your wife now. Just like in my old world, having children was a major reason why people got married here. Sylphie had probably been a little anxious about that part of things, since it was harder for her to get, for her people to get pregnant. Not that I would have left over, not that I would have left her over something like that, of course. Anyway, I guess this is going to be kind of rough on you too, huh? She said, since we can't, do it for a while. Hey, I'll live. I put up my, I could put up with a dry spell under these circumstances, unlike certain old men I could mention. Feel free to kick me out of the house for good if I go off and sleep with another woman, all right? I deserve it, I said. Oh, I don't think I'd be that angry. Maybe a little sad, but I'd understand. Really? That seemed like an awfully mild reaction. I wasn't going to betray her or anything, though. I knew I'd feel like a total creep if she went out and cheated on me. I think I'd get upset if you messed around with another guy, to be honest, I confessed. Sylphie just laughed softly and smiled. It was an expression she only ever wore around me. No one else ever got to see it, and that made me really happy. We spent some quiet time together. In the evening, Aisha came back to our house with Norn in tow. Congratulations, Sylphie, said Norn, bowing politely. Thanks, Norn, said Sylphie, smiling as she patted her on the head. That got Norn smiling as well. She didn't seem to mind being petted as much as you might think. Maybe she actually enjoyed it, coming from the right person. In any case, it was nice to see the two of them getting along so well. Everyone wanted to come by and congratulate you, but I convinced them to postpone their visits for a few days, said Aisha in a calm tone of voice. She'd apparently assumed I would want to keep this an intimate family occasion for today. I didn't remember suggesting anything of the kind, but it seemed reasonable enough. Sylphie would probably be a little embarrassed over or overwhelmed to have a lot of people congratulating all her yeah. Okay, so that's just words are in the wrong place. It should be congratulating her all at once instead of all her at once. Okay. Overwhelmed to have a lot of people congratulating her all at once. It was better to give it a few days. Princess Ariel indicated that Miss Sylphie is expected to take a break from her duties for at least 2 years. She also said she would arrange a leave of absence from school. Great Aunt Elinolise has volunteered to assume Sylphie's bodyguard duties in her interim. Is Grandma really going to be okay? I mean, she has that curse and everything. She assured me that she could manage, madam. I wouldn't worry about her. Elinolise did know how to take care of herself as she had that magical implement now. Besides, she could always pull Cliff into an empty classroom or storage room if she needed to get busy during the school hours. Prince Zenobia says he'll be paying us a visit 5 days from now in the evening. He wanted to have dinner with us, so I'll get things ready for that. Princess Ariel will be stopping by in 10 days, also at night, but she indicated she wouldn't be dining with us. Cliff and Great Aunt Lenelise will be coming along on that visit. Miss Linnea and Miss Persenna indicated they'd wander by sometime, but I don't have any details as to when that might be. Miss Nanahoshi offered a brief message of congratulations to you both. I wasn't able to find Lord Battygatty, but I left a message for him. Aisha had rattled off the whole list of our friends quickly and efficiently. It was a steady tone of voice. It was like we had a personal secretary or something. The girl was definitely good at her job. Got it. Thanks for letting everyone know, Aisha. Of course, brother dear. Aisha looked over at Norn with a prideful smirk on her face. Norn met her gaze with a frown. Aisha seemed to take a certain degree of malicious joy in showing her sister up like this. There was some lingering conflict between them involving their positions in the family. I was always telling Aisha that she was an equal member of the family and it didn't matter if she had a different mother, but the two of them still fought constantly over the most minor things. To be fair, dude, um, that's common of siblings in general. The fighting and the bickering and all that, and the one upping of one another. Ah. my my brother and I, we're half siblings. We both share a mother in common. These two, of course, share a father in common. And I understand that my circumstances with Jason are not nearly the circumstances that these two share. Um, Nobody's sitting here going, "Oh, I'm the proper head of the household" or whatever. Because I mean, nobody gives a shit. But also, we just bicker and fight because we're siblings, and that's what we do. When you're close to somebody, you're gonna bicker and fight. Even if it doesn't matter whether you're siblings or if you're friends or whatever. Like after a certain amount of closeness, you're going to you're going to have conflict. And not when I say conflict, I just mean it could be any kind of conflict. It could just be like some light verbal teasing. But there's going to be conflict and confrontation because when you're close to someone, you let down your barriers. You let them see the real you. And so they see the parts of you that you don't show others, especially the bad parts. That's the thing about us. We tend to try and show. That's why I don't trust dating. I know that's an odd tangent to get off on, but I don't trust dating because it's essentially somebody just trying to show you the best qualities and the best parts of them, and you're not really seeing them for who they really are. And it's like whatever. Like I honestly just like would rather just go out, hang out, have fun, or sit around at home watching some shit, playing some games, whatever, than go out and spend a bunch of money trying to impress somebody, and just trying to be the best version of me and hide all of the worst parts of me, like my insecurities, my bad habits, stuff like that. It's like, dude, if you can't handle me as I am, then there's no point in this. Uh, the way I understand it, from a logical standpoint, not that I understand dating anyway because I'm a romantic, but uh, from a logical standpoint, um, dating doesn't make a lot of sense. All right. So moving on from that, sorry. But yeah, them fighting constantly, that's sibling stuff, just regular sibling stuff. All right. They did say squabbling with someone can be a sign of how close you are. That's kind of true, but it depends on how you squabble. It was probably okay to let things be as long as this didn't turn into a Cold War. They never said anything really cruel to each other when they fought, at least. I've got to say, though, I murmured, Dad's probably going to be shocked when he shows up and finds out I've got a kid coming. Oh, yeah, said Norn, her face lighting up at the mention of Paul. She really did love her dad. I could see her putting down marrying my dad on her list of dreams for the future. I can't wait to see the look on his face. I can't wait to see the look on his face. He's the type to spoil his grandkids rotten, so I bet he'll be overjoyed, I said. He was really sweet when you two were born. Aisha and Norn both looked a little nonplussed for a moment. Neither of them had any memory of those days, of course. Well, anyway, I'm really looking forward to it, Rudius, Norn announced. Those usually cheerful words put a smile on everyone's face. Oh, those unusually cheerful words, sorry. Sylvia and I were happily married. Paul, Zenith, and Lilia would be with us soon, too. And my little sisters were here, too. That was the life I dreamed of way back in Buena Village days, and it was close at hand. And here we go. This is why it's called Turning Point 2. Cut to the next paragraph. The bad news arrived 2 months later. I received a letter dated 6 months in the past. It had been sent by express delivery post. The sender's name was Geese, and the contents, as was usual with express letters, were very brief. Having trouble rescuing Zenith. Requesting help. The instant I saw those words, the world flashed white before my eyes. When I came to, I found myself in a pure white space. I'd been transformed back into the foul person I used to be, and I felt a surge of anger and resentment wash over me. Thank you. I was holding on to that sneeze, and I was like, oh, God, I know I got to sneeze. I stared suddenly at the figure in front of me. It was the smiling man god whose face was nothing but a blur. Hey there! The hell is going on? What are you talking about? That letter, the one from Geese. He said the rescue isn't going well. What's the deal? Well, I expect it means the rescue isn't going well. What do you want from me? But that's not what you told me. You said I'd regret it if I went to the Beggarite continent. What was all that about then? Were you lying to me? No, of course not. You'll regret it if you go to the Beggarite continent. It was true back then, and it's still true now. Ah, now I see. I get it. I'll regret it if I go to the Beggarite continent, but I'll also regret it if I don't go. Is that what you meant all along? Oh, I don't know about that. You weren't too unhappy with your life as of yesterday, were you? You made lots of friends here, you met interesting people, and you did a lot of growing up. Your condition was cured, you made friends with your little sisters, you even got married, and now you've got a kid on the way. Yeah, my life's not bad right now, but that's not the point. You told me not to go to Beggarite. You tricked me. I really didn't, though. Let me repeat myself one more time. If you go to the Beggarite continent, you will definitely regret it. What? But my family's in trouble. Tell me why, at least. Can't do that, I'm afraid. Damn it, I should have known better. You're always like this. You're being awfully harsh today. My advice has always proven helpful, hasn't it? Maybe, but that doesn't change the fact that you misled me this time. Look, can you at least give me some of the details? What am I going to end up regretting? I can't make this decision unless I know the risks and rewards. Most people have to make their decisions blind, you know. You're awfully demanding. I don't care. I don't care if I'm being unreasonable. I don't want to regret my choices. Well, if you actually think it through, a few of the consequences should be obvious. You spent the last year of your life, you spent the last year and a half as a student, right? And your little sister spent a year traveling here. If you'd gone to Beggarite instead, you would have missed each other completely. What? But Paul sent my sisters here because he saw my letter. If I hadn't written to him, they would have stuck around in Millis or waited in Eastport. Not true. Even if he hadn't gotten your letter, Paul would have sent his kids to the kingdom of Asura. Lilia's got family there, remember? Sure, okay, I guess you're right. Things aren't so different now, really. Let's say you set out on a journey tomorrow. What happens to Sylphie and your kid? You planning to leave her here all alone while you hike halfway across the world? So basically, I'll have some regrets no matter what I do. Naturally. It's impossible to avoid having any regrets, I'm afraid. If you head to Beggarid, you're going to miss out on at least one golden opportunity, the way I see it. You're better off staying put. Well, if you're that sure about it, I guess I probably will end up regretting it. Fine. Right. Well then, want to hear my advice? Yeah, sure, can't hurt, I guess. Ahem. Rudius, remain in Renoa until the next mating season comes around. Linnea and Persenna will pursue you aggressively. Choose one of them and begin a relationship with her. This will bring you greater happiness in the end. What the hell? You're telling me to cheat on my own wife now? I'm happy with Sylphie, and those two are just good friends, damn it. His last words echoing dramatically in the air, the man god disappeared, and I slipped back into unconsciousness. I woke up to find myself in bed. Sylphie was looking down at me with concern on her face. Oh, Rudy, are you okay? You were moaning in your sleep. Yeah, I'm fine. What had happened after I received that letter? I couldn't remember the specifics very well. I recalled staring at the page in a stupor, but nothing else except my dream. Things had been going too smoothly lately. I guess the shock had hit me hard. Geese's letter was alarming. Something had obviously gone wrong. Still, had the man god's words to still I had the man god's words to consider. If I set out now, there was a chance my family and I could pass each other on the road and I'd waste a couple of years of my life. Maybe this was too optimistic, but there was a chance that Geese had just sent out that letter in a moment of panic. I mean, it wasn't Paul who had written to me. It was Geese, my monkey-faced cellmate. Why would he write me a letter like this? Because he was trying to rescue Zenith too? But Paul's last letter hadn't mentioned him. It seemed likely Geese had found Zenith on his own. The letter was written 6 months ago. It was possible he'd been alone and feeling helpless at the time, but had met up with Paul and the others since then. Maybe he'd even sent a similar letter to Paul. They might have joined forces and rescued my mother a couple of weeks later. All of these were just possibilities, of course. I had absolutely no way of knowing what the situation really was. Not from this great a distance. There was Sylphie's child to think of, too. No matter how fast you traveled, it had to be a solid year's journey to reach the Beggarid continent. I knew the road down to Eastport from my last big journey, so it was possible I could cut the travel time down significantly. But even if I somehow managed to get there in 6 months, I wouldn't be back home for at least a year. That wasn't going to work, right? I couldn't just leave my pregnant wife all alone and go on some adventure. This is about that letter, isn't it? I couldn't bring myself to answer. I'd promised Sylphie I wouldn't disappear on her again. Given her my word. It wouldn't technically be disappearing if I explained everything beforehand, but that was just semantics. Even if we talked it through beforehand, or if I left her a thorough letter, it would still be agonizing for her to be left behind. Rudy, you don't have to worry about me too much, okay? I've got Aisha here to take care of me. There was just a hint of anguish in Sylphie's face, or on Sylphie's face. She was anxious, of course. This was her first pregnancy. Her belly was already getting bigger by the day. Sooner or later, it would be hard for her just to get up and down the stairs. And there was a chance I might die on this journey. I might never come back to her. She'd fought down that fear to speak those words. I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay with you, Sylphie, I said. When I said that, she smiled, though she still looked a little conflicted. The words of the man god continued to linger in my mind. No matter what choice I made, he'd insist I was going to end up regretting it. The next 3 days were long and difficult. Every time I saw them, Sylphie, Aisha, and Norn had anxious looks on their faces. I'd already told them I wasn't going to the Beggarid continent, but the more I thought about it, the more uncertain I felt. I was torn between my two choices, and there wasn't that many people I could turn to for advice. The first, Elinalise, nodded when I told her my intentions. I think that's wise, Rudius. You're better off staying behind for this one. The way she phrased that surprised me. It suggested she had other plans. Are you going to go, Elinalise? Sylphie's my granddaughter, Rudius. It's only right that I take this job for her sake, as much as yours. Apparently, she'd received an identical letter herself, and unlike me, she was ready and willing to go, even if it meant leaving her life behind. Aren't you supposed to be guarding Princess Ariel, though? There's very little real danger to her life while she's enrolled in this school. I wasn't doing much of anything, to be honest. That was probably true most of the time, but you never knew when things might take a dangerous turn. That was the whole point of having bodyguards. But of course, that was Ariel's decision to make, and Elinalise had basically volunteered herself as a goodwill gesture. I doubted the princess would object to her backing out. What about Cliff? I'll have to leave him. He might hate me forever, but I don't have much choice. Why don't you at least explain the situation? I'm sure he'd understand. Elinalise shook her head with a melancholy smile. It didn't look much like her usual smirk. Cliff's a pure-hearted young man. He has talent, drive, and vision. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the Pope one day. He's better off remembering me as nothing but a youthful indiscretion. Well, that just made me feel terrible for the guy. Members of the Millis Church were expected to stay loyal to a single person. If Elinalise just disappeared, it might shake the very foundations of Cliff's faith. He was a strong-willed person, but it was hard to know what losing his religion might do to him. And also, I'm the one who told you to stay here last time. That makes cleaning up this mess my responsibility, don't you think? Elinalise's words were so firm and clear that I found myself at a loss for words. Apparently taking that as agreement, she nodded. You just leave this to me and wait right here. You just leave this to me and wait here, dear. I want to see a happy great-grandchild waiting for me when I come back. It was clear that nothing I could say was going to change her mind. Next, I turned to Zenobia for advice. His expression didn't even change as I laid out the story. I see, he said calmly. No, actually, I'm doing it. I see, he said calmly. Well, I'm sure you'll deal with this matter easily enough and be back before too long. I will remain here and continue to pursue my research, but I do hope you'll return as quickly as possible. I kind of thought you'd ask me not to go, Zenobia, or demand that I bring you along. When we parted back in the Chiron Kingdom, he'd wept and hung all over me. A part of me had been hoping for something similar, but this time his attitude was very different. Should you wish for me to accompany you, I would be loath to refuse. But I'm unaccustomed to lengthy journeys, and I fear I might prove a burden. And of course, he shot a glance over at Julie, I couldn't bring the girl on such a trip. Julie was still a young child. Leaving her here in Ginger's care was an option, but that would mean putting their studies and research on hold, and if she came along instead, it would be dangerous to have her keep exhausting herself by using up all her mana. You think I should go, Zenobia? That is your decision to make, Master. He sounded almost dismissive now. I'd been hoping for some actual advice. However, if I may make one observation, he said. The birth of a child does not require a father's presence. If you're worried about your parents, why not go to their aid? I'll guarantee the safety of your wife and her sisters in your absence. There was a real conviction in Zenobia's words. Again. Okay, I just needed to make sure that nothing... Okay, because Alexa was doing a thing, and I was like, oh, did the internet die? What happened? So I was just checking on that. There was real conviction in Zenobia's words. It made sense that royalty would have a different perspective on this sort of thing, though. Most kings probably didn't rush to watch their concubines giving birth. I would, of course, prefer to have you at my side constantly, he said, but the choice is yours. You make some decent points, Zenobia. Thanks for the advice. Sylphie wasn't on her own here. She had Aisha, Zenoba, and Princess Ariel's retinue. She wasn't alone. We weren't alone. What was I supposed to do at the end of the day? Stay or go? Linelise wanted me to wait here while she went to Begarit alone. Zenoba wanted me to go, leaving matters here in his hands, which made more sense. Where was I most needed right now? Zenoba's logic seemed sound. As long as Sylphie stayed healthy, everything would be just fine. My presence wasn't going to make a difference. Still, that attitude didn't sit right with me. I wasn't a king, and I didn't want to act like one. It was obviously better for Sylphie to have me here, providing emotional support. Sylphie had encouraged me to go and told me not to worry. But this was her first pregnancy. Deep down, I knew she had to be terrified. She was probably fighting the desire to break down and beg me not to leave. I was the one who'd told her how I wanted kids over and over again. It might not even be, I hit my thing, spilled some water. All right. I might not even have been that serious about it at the time, but she'd obviously taken it seriously. And now that she was actually pregnant, I was thinking about leaving her behind while I traveled halfway around the world. It felt like a serious betrayal. On the other hand, I had to admit that I'd been putting off my responsibility to help Paul for a long time now. I'd put my own happiness first for years. Hell, I'd prioritize fixing my performance problems over searching for my mother. Maybe this was a wake-up call. Maybe it was finally time for me to pay the piper. I couldn't make up my mind. Both options would cost me greatly. It was now the fourth day after the letter's It was now the fourth day after the letter's arrival. I'd spent most of that time brooding over my dilemma. I wasn't sleeping well at all, and I couldn't motivate myself to bother with my... Why? Okay. Sorry, I was charging my phone. I'll check on that in a moment after I finish the chapter, which shouldn't have much left. Yeah, just a couple more days. Days? Pages. I was just sitting around on the first floor, bleary-eyed, doing nothing in particular. The mornings were chilly here, even in the summer, and I was feeling downright sluggish. For a while, I just watched the sunrise. Oh! After a while, I heard a small cry of surprise from behind me. Turning around, I saw that our front door was open and Norn was standing in front of it. She had a large bag on her back, the same one I'd used in my days as an adventurer. It was packed to bursting point. She was obviously preparing for a lengthy trip, but because she was only 10 years old, it looked more like she was going on a picnic or something. For a long moment, I just looked at her silently. Norn avoided my gaze. She looked like a kid who'd just been caught red-handed playing a prank on someone. Where are you off to? Norn didn't answer, so I repeated myself. Where are you going, Norn? Biting her lip, she finally looked at me in the eye and said, Well, if you're not going to help Rudius, I guess I have to go instead. I studied her face for a moment. Go where? She couldn't seriously mean the Begarit continent, could she? Norn was still so small. This was a 10-year-old kid we were talking about here. Okay, okay. Hold on. I'm going to go ahead and take care of this because that's just annoying. Why is it connected? Disconnecting. There we go. Shouldn't have been connected in the first place. Cool. It was at like 14% when I set it to charge. Jesus, a couple hours ago. Is it really 5 o'clock? That's crazy. All right. There was no way that bag had anything close to what she'd need for this trip. She probably had some money, but did she know how to spend it wisely? Did she even know the route she would take? How did she intend to deal with the dangers she encountered on the way? She might get kidnapped by slavers the minute she set foot out of this city. Norn, I can't let you do that. I said, but Rudius, please, Mom and Dad are in trouble. She was tearing up now, but she kept her eyes fixed on mine. What? Why aren't you going to help them? Why? Well, because I was going to have a child soon. I had my wife to think of. You're much stronger than me, Rudius. You know how to travel. Why are you going? She wasn't wrong. I wasn't as experienced as a Linelise, but I'd spent 5 years on the road as an adventurer. I had the know-how, at least. And although there were plenty of people out there more powerful than me, I could hold my own in a fight. As I was today, I could probably manage to travel across the demon continent without Regard's help. It was all true. I could do this if I wanted to. I'd been weighing the pros and cons of going for days, but that was because I could afford to choose. Norn didn't have that choice. She wanted to go help, but she couldn't. I, on the other hand, had the ability to reach the Beggarite continent, help our parents, and make it back safely. That was the whole reason Geese had sent me that letter to, and not someone else. Okay, Norn, you're right. Rudius? There were other people who could look after Sylphie for me, but I was the only one who could go save my parents. It had to be me. I could cut through the Beggarite continent to the city of Rapon. I could solve the I could solve the problems Paul and the others had run into. There wasn't anyone else I could entrust this job to. Arrogant. I'll go. Can you look after the house for me? Norn's face lit up, but an instant later she squeezed her lips together tightly and nodded with the most serious expression she could muster. Absolutely. Don't fight with Aisha. Help out Sylphie when you can, okay? Of course. All right. Good girl. I felt terrible about doing this to Sylphie and our baby. If she dumped me over this one, I wouldn't blame her. But that wasn't how I should be thinking about this. I needed to trust my wife. I'll go to the Beggarit continent then. I'd made up my mind now. I was going to save my parents. And that's chapter 7. Yeah, that was a lot. That put us at 50%. Literally at 50%. 139 out of 275. So we've got 3 more chapters to go. Guys, if you would please, mods, go ahead and tally up those exercises. Thank you. Just because you are sitting around listening, do not forget to post exercises, not at the beginning of the chapter. You could post them during. 10 crunches, 30 push-ups, 20 squats, 30 jumping jacks, 20 Russian twists. Oh, wow. Good stuff, good stuff. All right, let's get this done. Let's get this done. All right. Let's start with the 20 jumping jacks. Let me take my slippers off. 20 jumping jacks. Okay, there's 20 of that. And then for the squats, 20. Oh, no, it's 30 jumping jacks. Sorry, I owe 10 more. And now we have 20 squats. Take out those legs. All right. 20 heel touches. 10 crunches. Okay. And then 30 push-ups. Okay. Whew. 10 crunches. 30 push-ups, you say. 30 push-ups. Eighteen. There's 30. Ah. 30. Yes, indeed. He is planning on going against the man god's advice. There we go. Ah, good stuff. Good stuff. Ah. All right. Catch my breath for a minute. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, I'm just a fat guy breathing heavy. Time to pour another cup. Alrighty. Woo. Hmm. All right. Huh. Alrighty. There we are. Time to get started on the next one. Don't forget, guys, send more exercises if you want me to do them at the end of this chapter. Whew. Chapter 8 Farewells. The Begarid continent was a massive island, so reaching it would require crossing the sea. And my specific destination, the labyrinth city of Rapon, was located near the eastern coast. There were two possible routes I could take. The first involved traveling to Eastport, the King Dragon Realm's main harbor town, and catching a boat there. It wouldn't be the most direct route, but, pardon me, it would allow me to. Really? But it would allow me to enter Begarit from the east, cutting down the amount of traveling I'd have to do on that continent. This was the safest option. The other possibility was catching a boat from the Kingdom of Asura instead, which would bring me to the northern shore of the continent. This would involve cutting through more Begarit territory, making it a more dangerous path, but it would also save me a good amount of time. My best guess was that the first plan would take me 18 months, and the second about 12. Mm. Mm. My, uh, I'd be missing out on the birth of my child, no matter what. But that was far from my only worry, of course. For once, I was going to disregard the man god's advice. Knowing him, he might have been fully aware that I wasn't going to agree with him. But I'd never done the exact opposite of what he recommended before. This was comparable to if I'd avoided the kingdom of Sharon entirely on my way to the central continent. Lilia and Aisha would still be captives there, and I would have, and I never would have met Aisha. I guess that might have kept me from running into Orsted, though. Frick, man. I shouldn't have eaten those almonds. Mm-hmm. All right. Where would I go if things hadn't played out that way? We'd probably have made it to the refugee camp without too much trouble. Things might have ended just as terribly with Eris, though. No, it wouldn't. Mm. And 10 years down the road, I might have found out where Lilia and Aisha were, much to my regret. Yeah, he did say I would regret this too. He'd repeated that both times I'd talked about it with him. Mute. Okay. Apparently she's having trouble connecting. Oh my god. No internet issues? Okay. Just Alexa being Alexa. Good to know. Based on that, the reasons probably had nothing to do with my timing. No matter when I went to Begarit, I would end up with some new regrets. But there was no telling what those would be. I could imagine all sorts of possibilities. I might end up losing something, like one of my hands, maybe, or one of my parents. There was no point wasting time thinking about it. If I didn't go, I'd be stuck here waiting anxiously for at least a couple of years. In the end, I might learn that someone I cared about was dead. Paul or Geese might show up battered and bruised and blame me for abandoning them. Anything could happen, but I had to go, even if I knew I would regret it. Before anything else, though, I decided to talk to Alinalius about my decision. If I started with Sylphie and she broke down in tears, my resolve might waver. I wanted to steel myself by breaking the news to my friends first. I had Alinalius meet me in an empty classroom on the campus. When I told her what I was planning, she grimaced unhappily. Look, Rudius, didn't I tell you to stay here? Yes, you did, but you know there's still a chance Geese just jumped to conclusions. What do you mean? You know that man. You know the man, Rudius. He rarely thinks anything through before he acts. It's all hunches and intuition with him. Well, she wasn't wrong about that. Geese liked to keep the facts to himself, too, and he wasn't above manipulating people. The letter might be one of those cases, Lindley continued. For all we know, there's already another letter on its way to us saying disregard last message, Zenith is safe, or something of the sort. Yeah, the thought did occur to me. There was a chance we'd head out there and find that Paul had already rescued my mother. We might even miss each other on the road. It was possible, but think about it for a second, I said. Isn't it odd that Geese knew where to find me? What? I sent a letter to Paul a year and a half ago telling him where I was living. Geese was in the Begarit continent as of 6 months ago, at least. When did he learn we were in this city now? How did he send us those letters? Getting to Begarit would take a traveler about a year, letters and even letters didn't move that quickly. It wasn't like texting on your phone. You were looking at 6 months minimum. Even with an delivery service, the dates didn't line up. The only way Geese could have known my location is if he met up with my dad and the others. They must have told him where we were. Why was it Geese who wrote to us instead of Paul? Either Geese decided to send the letter all on his own, or my dad's stubborn pride got in the way. Oh, I see. Lenelise put a hand on her chin, considering this. In Paul's last letter, he'd assured me that he could handle Zenith's rescue by himself. That would have made it harder for him to ask for my help, even if he needed it. And Lenelise studied me for a few moments and let out a thoughtful, But eventually she nodded. All right then, I suppose we'll go together. I wasn't sure what exactly she'd been thinking about, but her smile looked a little sad. I got the feeling she'd half expected things to end up this way. We'd be traveling to the Begarit continent together, a party of two. An hour later, we met up again. Right. Let's begin by deciding our own route, shall we? And Linnaeus had returned briefly to her room to retrieve a large map of the world. She'd likely purchased it a few days ago in preparation for their journey. The two of us spread it out on a table, then leaned over it to consider our options. The map was fairly crude. It didn't have the names of specific roads or locations of many towns. It just gave you the shape of the continents, the major mountain ranges, and some other basic geographic features. Alinalius had evidently spent some time studying the possible routes. There were small marks on the map. Stop it, phone. Stop it. Stop connecting to my phone. Hmm. Okay, I'm turning Bluetooth on my phone off. Jesus. All right. There were small marks on the map indicating the rough location of Rapon and important locations we'd be passing on the way there. As I'd anticipated, there were two potential approaches. To start, I think we want to arrive at Rapon as quickly as possible. Alinalius was pointing at the shorter route, which would take us from Osira to the northern coast of the continent. But the route from the north is more dangerous, right? I asked. There were all sorts of risks involved with this approach. We didn't know the roads in Begarit, and we'd have to travel nearly the entire length of a dangerous continent. I was confident in my ability to slay monsters, but an unfamiliar land could still hold many dangers. I seem to remember you can speak the fighting god tongue, Rudius. Am I correct? Huh? Well, yeah, I'm not exactly fluent, though. In that case, we can simply hire a guide, and some bodyguards once we arrive. Ah, I see. Thanks to Alinalise's many years of experience on the road, we quickly agreed on our basic route. Having done that, we moved on to planning the details of our journey. First, we'd buy horses here in Renoa and load them up with just enough provisions to get to the Osira Kingdom. We didn't want to bring too much stuff, since that would slow us down. We'd replace our horses when necessary and drive them as hard as possible until we reached the port in Osira. Once there, we'd buy equipment and provisions. Foodstuffs were hard to find in Begarit, even when you had money to spare. The prices in Osira might be higher, but it was wise to stock up when we had the chance. As soon as we had everything we needed, we'd catch the next boat to Begarit. There, we'd hire a guide and possibly bodyguards if it seemed prudent. Alinalise would handle these negotiations while I acted as an interpreter. After that, we'd just let our guide lead us to the city of Rapon. Once there, we'd find Paul and the others, rescue Zenith, and take the same route back home. I've made the trip to Osira more than once, so it won't be an issue, said Linley thoughtfully. The only tricky part is choosing what we bring with us to Begarit. We couldn't carry anything we might want. A carriage could have solved this problem, but Begarit was apparently covered in deserts, and wagon wheels aren't much good on sand. We'd likely have to buy a steed like the lizard I'd used in the Demon Continent. Maybe they had camels or something. I think you can leave those details to me, though. I have more experience in this field, she said. Old age does have its benefits, huh? Don't provoke me, please. I'd spent 5 years as an adventurer, but compared to a veteran like Alinalise, I was still a fledgling. I ended up leaving a lot of the tough calls in her hands. Fortunately, we're both in reasonably good shape, Alinalise said. We should be able to push ourselves hard when necessary. Yeah, I guess so. I was confident Alinalise could march all day long through the desert, but not quite as certain I'd be able to keep up with her. I'd kept up my training, but there was no chance but there was a chance I'd slow her down a little. It didn't strike me as a huge problem, though. In any case, it's convenient that they breed horses for long distance travel in this region. We should be able to find some very suitable options. Our initial goal was to reach the port in Osira within 2 months. It was hard to say how long the crossing to Begarit would take, but we estimated 1 month. Neither of us had been on the continent itself, but it was apparently tough terrain, so we penciled in another 6 months to reach our final destination. Altogether, we were looking at maybe 8 months one way. That was faster than I'd estimated myself. I felt like there might be ways to cut it down further with creative uses of my magic, but I didn't want to risk slowing us down with amateurish experiments. The most important thing was getting there in one piece. We spent some more time discussing other details we'd need to be aware of on our journey. And Linelise cleared up a few things I didn't understand with remarkable precision as she had us hammer out quite a few decisions in advance to prevent any disagreements on the road. It was nice to know we weren't going to waste any time arguing about what to do next once we got underway. The biggest problem, after a while though, she put her hand on her chin and grimaced. I felt like we'd covered most of the important steps, but evidently I'd overlooked something. It's going to be my curse. Oh, right. Unless she slept with men on a regular basis, and Linelise would literally die. On a casual journey, that posed no issue. She'd just satisfy her needs in whatever town she wandered into. On longer trips, she often joined a party and found a willing partner. But on a rapid paced expedition like this, there would be times when none of those methods worked. Both of us fell silent for a moment. The answer was simple, of course. I could just sleep with her when necessary. My performance problems were a thing of the past. A random woman walked up to me to have sex with her. Walked up to me, asked me to have sex with her. I could probably manage just fine, but I didn't want to betray Sylphie. I'm not going to sleep with you on this journey, I said. Yes, that wouldn't be a good idea. I guess we'll have to stop by brothels or something on our way. The two of us were going to keep things strictly platonic. I wanted to make that clear up front, otherwise, we'd probably end up doing it on the road out of sheer convenience. What about that magical implement, though? I asked. It does weaken the curse's potency, right? Well, if I tried to take it, Cliff would ask why. You're really not going to tell him about this? For some reason, Linelea seemed determined to disappear without a word to Cliff. It felt needlessly cruel to me. Look, I think you need to talk to him first, I said. Let me help you out, okay? It'll be all right. The two of us ended up heading right over to see Cliff that same evening. When we arrived at his laboratory, Cliff came trotting over to show us the magical diaper in question with a big smile on his face. Look at this, you two! I've made it smaller already! It's not as heavy as the old one either. You should be able to wear this out for some time without... Cliff, do you love Linelise? Cutting him off mid-sentence, I put the question as bluntly as I could. Cliff stared at me with a look of blank confusion on his face. What? Of course I do! His tone suggested that I'd asked him the single most obvious question in the world. So far, so good. Will you keep loving her no matter what? Naturally. I love Lise from the bottom of my heart. You're aware of this, I'm sure. Well, good. That's what I wanted to hear. I explained the situation to Cliff. I explained that my family was in serious danger. I explained that Lise was an old comrade of my dad's and felt an obligation to help. And I explained that it would be a long journey, on which she'd probably need to sleep with other men. I went into great length, covering every relevant detail. Cliff listened silently and didn't interrupt me even once. When it was over, he paused for a long moment, then murmured? Yeah. I suppose I'd be a burden if I came along. Frankly, it was true, but it was hard for me to come out and say so. As I hesitated, Alinely stepped in to reply. Yes, I'm afraid so. You wouldn't be able to endure a journey like this, Cliff. She might have put it more gently under different circumstances, but this time she was blunt. I see. Frowning sadly, Cliff looked down at the ground. I felt a small, painful stab of sympathy in my chest. What was he feeling right now? Alinelius would have no choice but to sleep with other men on this journey. He understood the situation completely, and he knew she loved him. But it had to be painful, though. You know, Alinelius, maybe we can bring him along, I said. He can use barrier magic and advanced tier divine spells. Even if he doesn't have much stamina, he might come in handy sometimes. It's all right, Rudius. I wasn't useful in the slightest the last time I tagged along on someone else's adventure. This wouldn't be any different. As he spoke these words, Cliff stepped forward and handed me the magical diaper. Rudius? Yes? Take care of Lise for me. To be honest, I'd been expecting more wailing and gnashing of teeth, but it seemed Cliff understood his own strengths and weaknesses very clearly. Lise? This time he turned to face Alinelise, standing on tiptoe. He wrapped his arms around her. Cliff! She embraced him in return. When you get back home, let's get married, Cliff said. I know I haven't cured your curse yet, but I want to buy a house and live there with you. I've made you anxious by waiting this long to say that, haven't I? Maybe you were afraid it was just all talk? Oh, Cliff, but I'm a terrible person. I was planning to go off even without saying a word to you. I'd like to have the ceremony in the Millis style, if you don't mind. I know you're not a member of the church, but was Cliff deliberately ignoring what she'd just said? Maybe that was for the best. Lindley sure looked overjoyed. Cliff, dearest, I love you so much, more than anyone in the world. Just like that, she pushed him down onto the floor. Once I saw Cliff's shirt fly open into the air, I spun around and quickly left the room. It seemed like they needed some private time at the moment. I wasn't crazy about the way he'd just promised to get married after one last job, but maybe I was just too familiar with movie cliches. I spent the rest of the day going around telling everyone I knew about the situation. I was going to be leaving for nearly a year and a half at minimum. If there was real trouble in Ripon, it might be more like 2 years. That was a long time to just disappear on everyone. I needed to say my goodbyes at least. My first destination was the vice principal's office. It was probably best to take care of the formalities sooner rather than later. I found Genius behind his desk, as always, facing down a sizable pile of paper. Hello there, Vice Principal Genius. Ah, if it isn't Mr. Greyrat. Very nice to see you. I've heard you'd helped Miss Sevenstar complete a rather ambitious experiment. Yeah, that's true, only because Zenoba and Cliff helped us out, though. Ah, I see. I had no idea how word had gotten around about the summoning experiment. Maybe Genius was better informed than I thought. In any case, what can I do for you today? He asked. Well, I need to take a roughly 2-year leave of absence, I said. I wanted to get the paperwork taken care of right away. 2 years? That's quite a length of time. Yes, I'm afraid I've got a rather complex situation to take care of. That's so. There was no reason I couldn't explain the details, but Genius didn't ask. Very well, then. I'll put your enrollment on hold for the time being. Once you return to us, please come to see me. Is a 2-year hiatus not going to cause any issues? We wouldn't allow it for an ordinary undergraduate, but special students like yourself are allowed a bit more flexibility in these terms. Or matters. Sorry. Good thing I was a special student then. Thank you very much. That's quite all right. The special student system is designated to be as accommodating as possible, after all. In that case, could you also put a Linley's Dragon Road's enrollment on hold as a favor to me? She's not a special student, but she's going to be accompanying me as a bodyguard. Ah, I see. All right, I'll figure something out. Well, that was easy. It's nice to have a friend in the bureaucracy. Thanking Genius once again, I left the faculty building behind. A few minutes later, I spotted Linnea and Priscilla outside. The two of them waved at me from across the courtyard and trotted over. I took the opportunity to explain the situation to them as well. No kidding. Man, it's going to be boring without you around, boss. We're going to graduate by the time you get back, so I guess this might be goodbye. That hadn't occurred to me until now, but it was true. They were 6th-year students. 2 years from now, they would probably be back in the Great Forest. It made me a little sad that I wouldn't get to see them off. I guess you're right. That's a shame. Come to think of it, the man god encouraged me to begin a relationship with one of these two. If I'd chosen to hang around here until the mating season started in 2 months, things might have taken a turn in that direction. What's up, boss? Do I have something on my face? Linnea was an attractive girl. The twitchy cat ears, swaying tail, and healthy thighs were her most distinctive features, but she had big breasts, too. What was she, an E-cup? All the beast girls were on the well-endowed side, so that was probably about average. That cocky attitude would probably make her fun in bed, too. Whoa. Thinking about going around with us before you leave, boss? Priscilla had her charms, too. Those soft, floppy dog ears and her voluptuous body were her most notable assets. Dog-type beast folk seemed to have particularly big breasts for some reason. She had to be a G-cup. Jesus. I'd groped those things a few times, so I knew how soft they were. How good would it feel to bury your face in them, Sorry, I said. Someone recently advised me to make a move on you two once the mating season comes around. I was just remembering what they said. Whoa, seriously? Didn't know you were even interested. Yeah, you never really flirted back, so we figured we weren't your type. The two of them seemed surprised, but also more than a little amused. Of course, sleeping with them would have meant cheating on my wife, but from what the man god said, it sounded like Sylphie wouldn't have kicked me out of the house over it. Would she really just forgive me and for messing around while she was pregnant? Maybe there'd be an ugly fight before things calmed down. Hard to say. Either way, it would supposedly lead to greater happiness in the end. I loved my wife, but I was also a man. The idea of a harem had a certain appeal. I found myself picturing a foursome with Linnea, Persinna, and Sylphie. And in some alternate reality, could that have been my future? Nah, probably not. It was never a real possibility. Hmm. Hold on. Linnea? Persinna? Yeah? What's up, boss? Linnea and Persinna looked at me nervously. I guess I'd spoken in a slightly stern tone of voice. Let's stay friends, I said. The two of them instantly relaxed and shrugged their shoulders. Well, if you insist, said Linnea elbowing me in the side. A guy like you could use a few. Friends it is, said Persinna, elbowing me on the other side. Make sure you keep in touch. We ended up exchanging handshakes before we parted. Probably a first for us, actually. Some people like to say it's impossible for men and women to really be friends, but that isn't true. You could be friends with someone you're attracted to. It's just a matter of setting the right boundaries. Let's meet again someday, all right? I said, even if it's 10 or 20 years from now. Sounds good, boss. We'll both be big shots 10 years from now, so you can bow down before us and kiss our shoes. We're gonna conquer the Great Forest, man. I had to smile. Good to know they had ambitions, at least. Well, I hope you don't take revenge on me or anything. And so we went our separate ways. If we were lucky, maybe we'd see each other again sooner or later. A little later, I found myself standing in front of Nanahoshi's laboratory. I wasn't sure how to break the news to her. Nanahoshi was a lonely girl at heart. For all her outward hostility, I got the sense she was desperate for company, and more importantly, my absence was going to disturb her research or disrupt her research. Her plan to return home would be delayed significantly. I had to imagine she was going to try to convince me not to go. She might even blackmail me somehow. What was I supposed to do if she threatened to murder Sylphie if I left? Not that I expected her to go that nuts. Letting out a small sigh, I knocked on the front door and waited. The come in came a moment later. Nanahoshi looked up from her desk as I stepped into the room. What is it? This isn't your usual time. I'm afraid I've got some unfortunate news, actually. Unfortunate news? Unfortunate news? Nanahoshi's expression turned suspicious. I spent a few seconds debating how to begin before deciding that it didn't really matter. Best to get straight to the point. I'm going on a lengthy journey. My parents are in danger and I need to help them. They're in the labyrinth city of Rapon in the Begarit continent. It's going to be about 2 years before I'm back. What? After a moment of silence, Nanahoshi jumped to her feet, knocking her chair backward with a clatter. She pressed her hands down on her desk and stared at me, looking more stunned than anything. Rapon? Begarit? Did you say 2 years? She repeated the words slow as if trying to make sense. Oh, okay. Did you say 2 years? She repeated the words slowly as if trying to make sense of them. I know I said I'd help you with your experiments, and I do feel terrible about leaving now, but I really need to go. Nanahoshi's eyes opened wide and she took a great gulping breath, but instead of shouting, she dropped back into her chair and looked up at the ceiling. 2 years, she repeated. Once I get back, I promise to help you again as much as I possibly can. 2 years. Nanahoshi folded her arms and muttered the words to herself a few more times. She didn't try to stop me or cry out in despair. She just looked up at the ceiling, apparently deep in thought. We spent 5 extremely awkward minutes like this. Well, I guess I'll be going then, I said. There wasn't much else I could say here. Nanahoshi knew I'd been helping her out of the goodness of my heart. She probably wanted to change my mind about leaving, but was choosing to bite her tongue. I turned around to leave. Hold on just a minute, she said, and then I stopped in my tracks. To be honest, I didn't want to continue this conversation. I knew she was just going to try to stop me, but it felt like I owed her a full explanation, so I turned back around. Nanahoshi was rooting around in the bottom drawer of her desk for some reason. After a moment, she took out some kind of book or journal. She flipped through it to a specific page, then turned it around to show me. Take a look at this. I leaned forward curiously. Someone had pasted a section from a map onto the page. The map looked familiar enough. It depicted the area around this city, although the scale was a little on the larger side. Near the top of the map, someone had written the characters N1 down on the southwestern forest and a red X with the characters B3 above them. What is this, Nanahoshi? Nanahoshi was obviously hesitant to explain, but after a few moments she spoke up. It's a map of ancient ruins that contain teleportation circles. They can be found all across the world. Teleportation circles? Huh? Once again, I peered at the map, at the characters B3 specifically. Could that mean? That right there is a teleporter that will take you to the Beggarid continent. What? Come to think of it, Nanahoshi had mentioned something like this once, when she was telling me about her travels with Orsted. Something about how he could use teleportation circles to jump all around the world. Here's that scene for you. B3. She can't stop him, so she might as well help him get there quicker and return quicker, so it's not 2 years. But you said you didn't remember where they were. I remembered that part clearly. She told me she had no idea where to find them. Orsted swore me to secrecy at the start. This is forbidden magic, after all. I agreed readily enough, since I figured I wouldn't be able to remember them anyway. After a while, though, she started making some notes on the teleporter's locations, just in case she ever had to use them. Then she began secretly buying maps or roughly sketching her own. Sometimes she casually asked Orsted where they were, or noted the names of nearby cities, and then wrote it down instead of trying to memorize it. Stunned, I flipped through the journal. It was a rough and incomplete record. There were times when she couldn't procure a map, or they hadn't even visited a town, so she'd pen notes like mountains to the left, roughly 3 days travel east to reach the river, then 2 more to reach them. B3, bingo. All right. The letter part of her marks indicated the continent, and the numbers seemed to be the order in which they were accessed. N was the northern region of the central continent, S was the southern region, and W was the western. DE was Demon Continent. M was the Millis Continent. They hadn't visited the Divine Continent, apparently, but there were a few B's for Beggarid. When she didn't even know what continent they were on, she used letters like X or Y instead. It was obvious that she'd put a lot of thought into this thing. I've heard about this Rapon place you mentioned, she said. I remember where it is, too. There's a place called Bazaar close to this teleporter. And Rapon is about a month's journey to the north from there, I'm positive. It's that close? I flipped back to the page Nanahoshi had shown me first. It covered the area from the city of Sharia to the southwest forest. The scale was a bit unclear, but it looked like a journey of 10 days or so, maybe even less, and the teleportation circle would bring us to the point marked B3. I flipped back to the relevant page from the B3 teleporter. It looked to be about a week's journey to the closest town, so if Rapon was only a month away from there, we were looking at 47 days or so, and a 94-day round trip. We could get there and back in just 3 months. Even if we took a month to rescue Zenith, we'd be back home in 4. I could make it back in time. I could be here for the birth of my child. I'd still miss out on the mating season thing, but that really didn't matter. Are you sure about this? I asked. Didn't Orsted tell you to keep this a secret? I won't deny I'm a bit conflicted.
Sounds like
but,
someone could benefit from some of
Thanks for the follow. Can we get some Nyantas in the chat, please? But I owe you a lot after that last time. Just don't share this information with anyone, all right? Teleportation magic is a forbidden art. If word gets around, the ruins will be destroyed by local governments. And that would make life less convenient for Orsted. He'd probably get mad at both of us. Just thinking about that guy made me tremble a little. I was going to keep my mouth shut, that much was for sure. Thanks, Nanahoshi. This is a huge help. I just want you to get back here as quickly as possible, that's all, she said with a dismissive snort. The girl really was pure tsundere. Pure tsundere. Okay, let me do that as tsundere as possible. I just want you to get back here as quickly as possible, that's all. There we go. Carefully closing the journal, I lowered my head to her in gratitude, then turned to leave. Oh, I almost forgot, she called. On the first page, I sketched the signs they use to mark these ruins and described how you dispel the concealment magic that protects them. Make sure you read that carefully. Got it. I owe you one, Nanahoshi. No, you don't. I'm just repaying my debts. Smiling at her grumpiness, despite myself, I left the laboratory behind. I immediately headed back to East. We could make this trip much quicker than expected. That was fantastic news. She'd be overjoyed, of course. But we also needed to alter our plans completely. The trip was only going to take a month and a half, after all. We might even be able to bring Cliff along for that. Slapping my cheeks in an attempt to keep myself from grinning like an idiot, I opened the door to Cliff's laboratory and was greeted by something that resembled a Renaissance painting of Venus. I'm sorry, Rudius, I can't go after all. Elise was lounging around wearing nothing but a blanket, and she'd apparently lost her nerve completely. Her slim, elegant limbs and tastefully draped bosom definitely had a certain classical appeal, but I felt no urge to display her in a museum. I'd never been a big art appreciation guy in the first place. It did occur to me that she'd make a pretty sexy figurine, though. Cliff was sitting slumped in a corner of the room, looking a bit like an Egyptian mummy. There was a big smile on his face, but he was obviously passed out. He actually looked more like a masterpiece than his girlfriend. What would you title a statue like this? Blissful Demise? I can't bear to be parted from Cliff for 2 whole years, yelped Elise. I know it's horrible of me, but I simply won't do it. Well, people do say women are more guided by their emotions, don't they? I mean, if you're going, then there's hardly any need for me to tag along too, she babbled. Your father and I aren't even on good terms. He probably wouldn't want to see my face. Shouldn't I stick around to protect my pregnant granddaughter in case? It was hard to remember this was the same woman who'd sternly told me that I should wait here while she took care of everything. I tried my best not to judge her too harshly. She was returning to reality after a stint in paradise, that was all. Well, okay, Elise, the thing is, I just found a way that could get us there and back in only 3 months, but, huh? Elise, frozen for a moment, stared at me in disbelief. What are you talking about, Rudius? I double-checked that Cliff was still asleep, then leaned down to whisper in Elise's ear. So actually, Nanahoshi... Oh, not my ears, they're sensitive. Can you actually pay attention, please? I was only joking, dear. I showed Elise the journal and gave her a quick explanation, making sure to emphasize that Nanahoshi had sworn us to secretly. She flipped through it a few times, unable to hide her astonishment. Did we really make it there that quickly? That's right. If we do it this way, I might even make it back in time to see my child born. This could work. A 6-week journey wasn't nearly such a long trip. Elise seemed to have snapped back into planning mode, judging from how seriously she was scrutinizing the journal. Oh, all right then, she said after a moment. I'll come along after all. Another change of heart, huh? I did understand where she was coming from, though. 2 years was a really long time. Considering how much quicker this route is, we could bring Cliff with us, I said. No, we're leaving him behind. You sure? I doubt he could keep it to himself if he learned about these teleportation circles. Really? Cliff was a reasonably trustworthy guy, wasn't he? And again, he was probably the type to let secrets slip through without even meaning to. Yeah, it was probably better to keep as few people in the know as possible. The more people we brought into the fold, the more likely word would get out. Besides, there was trouble waiting for us in Rapon. We wanted to show up with a small, elite group of experienced people. If I were going to take anyone along, I'd have preferred someone like Regard. He was both a powerful fighter and as tight-lipped as they come. Batty Gaddy came to mind, too. He'd been alive for thousands of years, so it was very possible he already knew about the teleportation circles, and he seemed to be familiar with Orsted, so it would be easy to explain the situation to him. Unfortunately, I hadn't seen either of those two in some time. No one else came to mind as a likely candidate. Zenoba might be strong in a brawl, but he definitely wasn't a seasoned traveler. Come to think of it, if we ran into trouble over there, we could always come back and get more help. Better to play it safe for now, since we didn't know our route. But once we'd made the trip, it wouldn't be so hard to come back and fetch a few additional allies. We'd have to tell them about the teleporters, but that was better than falling short of our goal. The trip wasn't brief, of course, but even if we had to wait 3 months for reinforcements, it was at least a viable option. All right, just the two of us for now, then. Right. Let's get this over with and get back home as quickly as we can. At least the Linneleys seem to be on board again, for now. Finally, I headed home to tell Sylphie. After gathering her, Aisha, and Norn in the living room, I broke the news right away. I think I'm going to go help my parents after all. Sylphie let out a small, surprised sound, and an anxious expression flashed across her face. I'd taken her off guard, apparently. But after a moment, she shook her head as if to clear it, and then nodded seriously. Okay, I understand. I'll take care of things here. I'm sorry to disappear like this so suddenly, even though I promised not to, I said. You're not breaking your promise, Rudy. This isn't sudden, and you aren't disappearing. Sylphie smiled at me, but it looked forced. No matter what she said, she was obviously struggling with this. It may hurt my head. It made my heart hurt just to look at her. How long do you think you'll be gone? About 2 years, right? No. Nanahoshi showed me a way to get there using teleportation circle. I think I should be back before the baby comes. I'd already made the decision to tell her about the teleportation thing. If I couldn't trust Sylphie to keep a secret, I couldn't trust anyone. Huh? You're going to teleport there? Is that safe? She was obviously startled. The anxiety was visible on her face once again. It made sense that she'd been worried, of course. Both of us had lost a great deal because of the displacement incident. I can't say for sure just yet, I said, but Nanahoshi seems to have used these circles personally in the past, so I think it's going to be all right. Okay. Sylphie still looked worried, so I pulled her close to me and whispered the next part in her ear. Don't worry, I'll be back no matter what. Right. Sorry about this. That's okay. Turning my head, I spoke to one of my sisters who stood nearby. Aisha. Yes? Her expression was even more uncertain than Sylphie's at the moment. Can I leave things here to you? I think so. Mom taught me about caring for pregnant women. If it gets to be too much for you, get help from anyone you can. Don't be shy and don't try to do everything by yourself. You're a talented kid, but you're still inexperienced. Turn to the adults when you need advice. Right. Aisha nodded seriously. I did feel a bit nervous about this, but it would probably be all right. There was no perfect solution here. Norn? Yes, Rudius? If Sylphie and Aisha get overwhelmed, try to step in and help them, please. Maybe just talk to them when they're feeling stressed. You know how hard it can be to face that sort of thing alone, right? Of course. And try to keep up with your studies while I'm gone, too. I'll do my best. Norm seemed very determined to play her role in this properly. Hopefully that wouldn't get her butting heads with Aisha or anything. Well then, what did that leave? Was there anything else I needed to say to them? Oh, right. Maybe we should decide on a name for the kid before I go. I was planning to make it back in time, but you never knew what might happen. It couldn't hurt to get this settled beforehand. What sort of name would be best? People tended to like cringe-inducingly cool names here, so, If it was a girl, maybe Seal or Sion? If it was a boy, maybe Nero or Wallachia? Nah, this wasn't a video game. Our names were Rudius and Sylphie, so we could sort of combine them. Maybe something like Sirius if it was a boy, or Lucy for a girl. It was kind of cliche, though. Maybe I should just ask Paul for advice. After thinking all of this over for a few seconds, I finally noticed everyone was looking at me with strange expressions on their face. Rudy, you want to name the baby? Why would you say something like that? Rudius. They seemed genuinely shocked. Aisha even had tears welling up in her eyes. What was the idea that Was the idea that odd? I didn't remember any rules about not naming kids before birth. If you name a child before you leave on a journey, you'll never come back home. Sophie looked more anxious than ever before. Apparently, I'd tripped over a death flag unique to this world, one that I had no memory of. No, wait, I remembered now. Was this about that thing from the story from Perugius? One of Perugius's companions was an Imperator fire mage named Feroz Star, known as the Fortune Man. Feroz decided to name his unborn son before departing for the front lines, just in case he didn't make it back safely, choosing to pass the boy his own name. In the battle that followed, however, Feroz was defeated by the Demon King Reiner Kaisel, and he died thinking of the child he'd never lived to meet. His son, inheriting his famous father's legacy, went on to become a magnificent magician in his own right. That was how the tale went, at least. I'd also heard a version where the kid actually turned out to be a good for nothing nobody. At any rate, the story was so well known that everyone now thought naming an unborn child before setting off on a journey would bring terrible disaster. It wasn't like that decision had actually caused for Rose's death, of course, but people can be superstitious about these things. Okay then. You think we should wait until I get back? I don't know. Maybe? But I kind of want to have a say in this, you know? And there's always the worst case scenario. Don't even talk about that, Rudy. Right? Sorry. Still, this was my firstborn child we were talking about. That didn't feel completely real yet, but I wanted to at least participate in choosing a name. Ahem. Aisha cleared her throat meaningfully. She'd clearly come up with some sort of proposal. How about this, brother dear? If the child is born before you make it back, we'll call them Rudius Jr. temporarily. Once you're back home, you'll pick a proper name. We can make the Rudius into his middle name, like the famous North god Kalman. Rudius Jr., huh? Well, it wasn't too unusual to give a child their parents' name in this world. If we ended up going with Lucy, it would turn into something like Lucy Rudius Greyrat. That didn't sound too bad to me. It did feel a little embarrassing since I still associated names like that with wealthy aristocrats, but it seemed more common here. Wait a second, though. What if it was a girl and I never made it back? She'd be stuck with Rudius Jr. forever? What if she got picked on? What if she was turned into a furious little monster who had to beat everyone senseless to defend her stupid name? I tried to convince myself it was unlikely. The world didn't need another mad dog. Well, whatever. Just another reason to make it back home safely. That sounds good to me, I guess. Sylphie? Yes? I felt like I had more to say to her, but I couldn't find the right words. I had the feeling anything I could say would come out sounding weirdly ominous. Come here. So instead, I just walked up to her and put my hands on her shoulders. Huh? Uh, After a moment of confusion, she closed her eyes, lifted her chin, and folded her hands in front of her chest. She was actually trembling a little. This wasn't exactly a first for us, but I wasn't sure we'd ever done it this ceremoniously before. I glanced over at my sisters. Aisha was leaning forward eagerly. Norn covered her face with her hands, but was peeking between her fingers anyway. I shot both of them a quick wink. Norn instantly closed her hands over her eyes, but Aisha winked back happily. What a little rascal. Did she really want to see a kissing scene this badly? Well, I couldn't hurt to indulge her just this once. This was a special occasion. I kissed Sylphie deeply and listened to my little sister squealing softly in delight. All right, there's the chapter. Tally up the things. We're now about to start chapter 9. Let's tally up those exercises. 20 crunches, 10 push-ups, 30 squats, 10 jumping jacks, and 10 Russian twists. So I got 30 squats. Jesus. And 10 jumping jacks. All right. Started on those jumps. The squats are going to take a while. I'll probably do 15, go do the other exercises, and then done another 15. we go. Okay, there's 15. Shit, we're 60% of the way through. That's crazy. Okay, how many? Just 10. And I got 20 crunches. Okay.
Sounds like someone could benefit from some of Nyanta's nibbles.
Now for those 10 push-ups. Here's 10. Now we have 15 more squats. Okay, gang, I will be right back. I'm going to make a quick meal. Shouldn't take but a few minutes. So I'm going to move us over to the intro, and then we'll start back up with volume 9 or chapter 9. 165 out of 275. Not bad. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Oh, there's a bit of egg. All right. So, as I said, made myself a fried egg sandwich like I described before. Um, Same process. I cut the cheese very thinly. Cut the cheese. And then also made me a bowl of popcorn because it's okay and it's safe for me to have popcorn. That's all right. Alrighty. Let me just quickly finish this up and we'll get to it. In the meantime, if you have any exercises you would like to redeem, now might be a good time to do it. There is one other thing I would like to mention that I forgot to do on this sandwich. I forgot to add when I was talking about making it. Well, yes, you can do it while I'm reading, but it's also cool to do it here. Anyway, uh, I normally add salt and pepper on the egg. I didn't this time, but that's okay. Mm, mm, mm-hmm. All right. Hopefully, this is a shorter chapter. Let me check this out. One. Okay, 17 pages for chapter 9 and 13 for chapter 10. So when we get done with chapter 10, that'll put us 70% of the way through this. All right. Now remember, guys, it's not 40 in total, it's 40 per chapter. So you guys can make me do 40 of each exercise per chapter. Now, if it goes more to that, it just carries over to the next chapter. But that's cool. The important part is to help me lose weight and get healthy. And this is probably the biggest meal I've had today. I had a couple spoonfuls of um, cottage cheese. Then I had two spoonfuls of cottage cheese on two half pears. That was breakfast. That was straight up breakfast. And now I'm having what's essentially lunch. Uh, I woke up at 1 in the afternoon because I was up till about 6 last night. So it's a thing. It is most definitely a thing. Dude, is it just me or are my teeth looking brighter than usual? I mean, they're janky as fuck down here. But my teeth up here are looking kind of white. Pretty bright. That's some craziness. All right. So, I'm going to try and get through this in short order. Let's do it. Okay, so that part was apple juice. I'm going to go ahead and. There's water. Get those kernels out of here. And I just want more. I guess you could say this is kind of a heavy meal versus my very, very light breakfast. Hmm. All right. All right. Chapter 9 To Beggar It. Alenalise and I revised our travel plans in a hurry. First of all, we'd purchased a horse to ride it together to the forest where the teleporter was hidden. We'd then warp ourselves over to the Begarit continent. If Nanahoshi's memory was accurate, this would deposit us about a week's journey south of an oasis town called Bazaar. Unfortunately, we'd be traveling through an all but barren desert. Nanahoshi had gotten so exhausted that Orsted ended up having to carry her on his back. We'd have to show up well prepared. I had my magic, so we wouldn't be lacking for ice cold water at any time. That alone would make things significantly simpler. We didn't have a map of the town of Bazaar, but Alenalise had confidence in her ability to navigate unfamiliar terrain. She claimed that elves could travel through even the densest of forests without losing their way. I felt the need to mention that a desert wasn't very much like a forest, but that just earned me an angry lecture about her many years of experience as an adventurer. Given how confident she seemed, I had to assume we'd be okay. Once we made it to Bazaar, we could hire a guide to our final destination. Rapan was roughly a month to the north, and that was a lengthy journey. Alenalise could keep us moving in the right direction, but it would be much faster to find a local who knew the easiest route. After arriving in Rapan, we'd rescue my mother as quickly as possible, then return home by the same route. It would mean telling more people about the teleportation circles, but we didn't have much choice. I couldn't tell my parents to take the long way back. Hold on. Man, I knew I shouldn't have eaten popcorn, but I was like, I want it. I'd have been fine with just a sandwich. Anyway, from what we knew, Paul was traveling in a party of 6 people, probably 7, assuming he joined up with geese. We just have to wear all of them to. We just have to swear all of them to secrecy. Incidentally, I'd made sure to warn Sylphie and my sisters not to tell anyone about the teleporters. Just to drive the point home, I mentioned that a very scary guy who could beat down Regard in an instant might get really angry with them if they blabbed. When Popcorn fights back. All right, there we go. They were a bit stuck in the back of my teeth. And they're a little annoying. Still there. Much better. All right. With our basic plan nailed down, Linley's and I got to work on the details. I already had my gear sorted out. I'd be bringing my trusty staff, Aquahartia, and a robe that Sylphie had picked out for me. The only other thing that came to mind was the summoning spell that Nanahoshi had given me earlier. I didn't know when it might prove useful, but I decided to bring 10 copies of the scroll along with me. I could make a new printing plate in a single day, but I didn't want to be lugging ink around in a desert. The scrolls were much lighter and less fragile, and if I ended up needing more, I could always try to buy some ink in Ripon. On that note, I didn't have any local currency. I wasn't even sure what kind of money they used over there. It was probably easiest to just bring something I could easily exchange for cash. Other than that, I just needed food rations for the journey. This was my first trip to Begarit, so I had no idea what sort of tools or equipment I might want. I'd have to obtain them locally as the need arose. Since our journey was only going to last 6 weeks now, I had some free space in my bags to work with. I could technically bring along some things I didn't really need. That didn't mean I was smart enough to weigh myself down with nonsense, though. It was. Pardon. Ugh. It was probably best to travel light. We'd be reaching Bazaar in a week, so it wasn't like we'd be wandering the wilderness for long. Still, I decided to bring along a book that contained some specifics on teleportation magic, given the potential risks we were facing. I knew Orsted had used these things in the past, but that didn't mean it would be safe for us. Hmm. I headed back to the faculty offices, flattered Genius for a while, and got permission to borrow a few titles from the library on a long term basis. I picked up the book I had in mind, an exploratory account of the teleportation labyrinth, and grabbed a volume called The Begarit Continent and the Fighting God Tongue myself. While I was at it, I felt like that one might come in handy if I had trouble making myself understood. I seem to remember that Ginger knew a thing or two about horses, so I asked her to accompany me to a local stable. I took the chance to let Zenoba know about the situation. I see. You'll be able to return in roughly half a year then. Yeah, I can't explain how, though. Is that so? You know, I could order Ginger to go along with you if you'd like. Don't be ridiculous, Zenoba. Why would I go out of my way to make an enemy of the poor woman? Well, all right then. Don't worry about me, okay? Just worry about looking out for Sylphie and my sisters. There's no need to worry yourself on that account. Perhaps I could even assign Ginger to protect them in your absence. I snorted. Is it just me, or are you trying to get her out of your hair? Zenoba glanced over in Ginger's direction, then leaned over to whisper in my ear. The woman is something of a nag, Rudius. Ever since I was a child, she's lectured me about every single mistake I make, and lately, she's been just as strict with Julie as well. It's getting tedious. This guy sounded like a college student complaining about his mother. I guess he was in his mid-20s, come to think of it. I could sort of understand how he felt. Sort of. Mostly, though, I just felt bad for Ginger. She was still young herself. The girl was wasting her 20s taking care of an oversized baby. What do you think about this, Julie? I asked. Our junior pupil had tagged along on the horse shopping expedition. I'd have the. Mm, mm. I'd have to encourage her to keep her training while I was gone. Um, pardon me. We could resume the Regent figure project after I return. Miss Ginger just points out Master Zenoba's bad habits. Well, there you go. Better shape up, Zenoba. You need to get a you need to set a good example for her. Yeah, this really did remind me of a mom barging into the filthy apartment her two kids had been filling up with junk. It was kind of heartwarming in a way. Anyway, make sure you keep practicing like you promised while I'm gone, okay, Julie? Yes, Grandmaster. I'll do my best. Julie wasn't stumbling over her words much at all lately. We had Ginger to thank for that as well. At this point, the woman in question came back over to us, leading a horse along by the reins. Here you are, Sir Rudius. I believe this one should serve your needs. Oh. Hmm. Hold on. Man, does my tongue get OCD or what when I have popcorn? Um, the horses in these parts tended to be bulky creatures since they had to push their way through the snow most of the year. Up close, this one almost looked like a different species from the slender racehorses I was familiar with. It wouldn't sprint as fast, but it looked like it could keep going for days at a time. Horses in this world were monstrously strong in general. For no particular reason, I decided it was worthy of the name Matsukaze. Thank you, Ginger. You've been a great help. It's quite all right. It was no real trouble. Want me to ask Zenoba to do something for you? Maybe massage your shoulders? Sir Rudius, I have respect for you, but I wish you'd show a bit more. Right. Sorry, it was just a joke. Judging from the way she was glaring at me, Ginger didn't find it very funny. Anyway, I had my horse, and I'd let the most important people in my life know what was going on. Was I forgetting someone? Maybe. I felt like I'd spoken with all my friends, though. Batty Gaddy still wasn't around, but there wasn't anything I could do about that. Well, whatever. I checked every item off my to-do list, and I'd sworn everyone who knew about the teleportation to circles to secrecy. We were good to go. On the fourth day of our departure, my wife and two sisters saw me off at the front door. I'll be back before you know it, Sylphie. Ah, it's always like this. It's always like that. There we go. Finally, got that bit out. All right. Rudy, Sylphie threw her arms around me with tears in her eyes. I'd gotten accustomed to holding her over the last 6 months. Her body was small and radiated warmth. It felt like hugging an affectionate little animal sometimes, but today her shoulders were trembling and she was sniffling softly. This wasn't making it too easy to leave, honestly. And that's why. Should I just stay behind after all? Maybe I could wait for my child to be born before I help the old man. I mean, think about it. Normally, it would have taken me almost a year just to get out of there. Couldn't I stay home for another 7 months and leave after my child's born? The journey should only take 6 weeks now, so I could still manage it on a schedule. I wasn't strong enough to keep the thoughts from flitting through my mind, but at the end of the day, Geese had been desperate enough to send an express message from the Begarit continent. Those services weren't cheap, even for the briefest of letters. It wasn't something you did unless you had to. Time was probably of the essence. And if I left now, I could still make it back to see my child be born. I just had to think of it as a kind of business trip, basically. Wiping away Sylphie's tears, I spoke to my sisters who were standing awkwardly behind her in the foyer. Aisha, Norn, I'll see you later. Take care of things for me, okay? I wasn't entirely sure myself what I was supposed to mean, but the two of them nodded emphatically. Don't worry, brother dear. I'll keep matters well in hand here. Of course, Rudius. Be careful out there. I nodded. Good to hear. Try not to fight with each other, okay? They replied, yes, in perfect unison. I couldn't help smiling at the grimly serious expressions on their faces. Sylphie! Alinalise chose this moment to ride up dramatically on on our horse. He was carrying 2 full weeks of provisions on his back, but didn't even seem to feel the weight. Our Matsukaze really was a beast. Be brave, dear. You'll be all right. You don't need a husband hanging around to give birth anyway. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience on this one. I guess so, said Sylphie with a weak smile. You be careful out there too, Grandma. Oh, don't you worry about me. I'll manage just fine. Alinalise flipped her hair upward in a gesture of supreme confidence. The woman could be cool when she wanted to. She looked like a lady knight from a fairy tale or something. It was a shame I'd seen her throwing a tantrum just the other day. The memory of that kind of tainted the whole experience. Well, I guess everyone has their weak spots, right? I certainly wasn't lacking a few of my own. Okay, then, we'd better get on the road. Not wasting any more time, I hopped up behind Alinalise. She was a slender woman, but she sat ramrod straight on in the saddle. It was kind of reassuring to know she had the reins. It wasn't unpleasant having my arms around her either. I felt a little stab of guilt, but hey, I was only borrowing her from Cliff for a little while, right? Rudy? Sophie tilted her head curiously at me. Not that I was doing anything fishy. Really, I had to hold on tight so I wouldn't fall off. That was all. All right, everyone. See you soon. At last, our journey got underway. It took 5 days for us to reach the forest to the southwest of Sharia. During that first leg of the journey, we were accompanied by an adventurer we'd hired from the guild. He'd be responsible for taking our horse back to the city afterwards. Horses would only slow you down in a dense forest, and we didn't know the size of the teleporter we'd be using. It would be convenient to have a beast of burden for our travels across the desert, but it was smarter to just procure one over there. We'd probably find something better suited to the local climate. All in all, it made more sense to have someone just escort the horse back to Sharia for us. He hadn't come cheap, so I had every intention of keeping him. I'd never learned how to ride, so I mostly spent the trip clinging to Alinalise from behind. Of course, I did keep myself occupied, in a perfectly platonic way. I spent an entire day charging up that magical diaper Cliff had created. This did involve wrapping my arms around Alinalise's waist, so I caught our hired sword shooting me a few envious glances. After arriving at the forest, we said our goodbyes to Matsukaze. Hopefully, he'd hit it off with Aisha and the others. Now we had a forest to investigate. I forget exactly what its name was. Something like the Lumen Forest, maybe? A word that meant stomach in some language or other. That choice made sense if once you were inside the place. The vegetation was incredibly dense, and there were so many tall old trees that their branches blocked out the sun. Kind of a gloomy place, really. The ground was thick with roots, so it often felt like you were walking on top of a lumpy, uneven wooden floor. You had to watch your step constantly. The bigger trees had much larger roots, and in some places, they even formed natural staircases of sorts. It was almost like an outdoor dungeon. Even an experienced ranger could easily get lost in places like this. And once you wandered off the path, it would be all too easy to become a monster's prey or to slip and fall off a wooden platform. Many human bodies had no doubt been digested by this forest over the century. Again, guys, while I'm in the middle of reading, if you want to drop those exercises, do them now. It didn't look like any woodcutters came out here too often. Maybe the monsters here were relatively strong or numerous? Or maybe there were other forests in the area that were just more conveniently located. It was probably some combination of the three, honestly. Just to be clear, the woodcutters of this world weren't anything to scoff at. A team of lumberjacks were often more organized and capable than an average band of adventurers. Forest offered plentiful lumber, but they were also home to many monsters. Cutting down a single tree was a dangerous task. People had to form teams and sometimes even hire bodyguards. A typical expedition involved some serious combat on top of the actual woodcutting, so the Woodcutters Guild was home to plenty of formidable characters. Besides, their work was a vital function of this world. If trees didn't get cut down on a regular basis, you'd eventually get swarms of dangerous tree ants. You remember the formation we discussed earlier, Rudius? Elinley said. Let's take our positions. Got it. Still, this wasn't nothing. This wasn't nothing for veteran adventurers like us. We were alert, of course, but calm. Elinley took the lead, and I followed behind her at a set distance. As you might expect from an elf, she knew how to navigate this terrain, and thanks to her excellent hearing, we had advanced warning whenever enemies tried to ambush us. 3 monsters at 2 o'clock. Got it. On command, I fired off a stone cannon ahead and to my right. The projectile struck a green board just as it broke through the foliage, sending it flying backward on a spray of blood. Its 2 companions immediately turned tail and fled. Elinelius was heading the search party, and I was on destroy duty. So far, we were wiping out every threat before they even got close to us. We hadn't engaged in any real combat so far, which was fine by me. Elinelius seemed to be guiding us around dangerous areas where animals were congregating in larger numbers. This was evidently a skill she'd picked up over the years rather than some sort of natural elven instinct. I think I found it. This is the monument you were looking for, right? After some time, Elinely spotted the thing we were here to find. It was a flat stone slab with a symbol carved on its surface, standing in front of a thick wall of vegetation. I'd resigned myself to the possibility we'd be combing this forest for 2 or 3 days, but we'd managed to find the thing before the sun set. Maybe the woman had skill points and fine secrets or something. The carving on the stone door was familiar to me from the monuments to the 7 great powers. It bore the crest of the dragon god, a sharp, angular pattern made up mostly of triangles. It reminded me a little of the magic symbol that appeared on some anime character's forehead when he powered up, although the specific details were totally different. Maybe they were both supposed to be representations of a dragon's face. Still, had I seen this crest on its own before? Oh, right, it looked a lot like the symbol on those papers I'd found in the basement of my house. There were some subtle differences, but they were definitely similar. Maybe the man who created that killer robot had some connection to the dragon god? Well, there were probably a bunch of similar symbols out there. In my old world, lots of countries had similar flags. Is something the matter? Nah, it's nothing. Alenelius had noticed me studying the symbol at length, but I decided not to pursue this line of thought any further. We had other priorities at the moment. I'll get started on removing the barrier then, I said. All right. Alenelius turned around to watch my back while I worked. I placed a hand on the stone's surface and opened Nanahoshi's journal to the page where she'd written her notes. There was a specific incantation I was supposed to use. The worm lived only for his ideals. None could escape the reach of his mighty arms. He was the second to die, a dragon general, his scales green and gold, his life the most ephemeral of dreams. In the name of the holy dragon emperor Shirad, I break this seal. The instant the final word left my mouth, I felt mana flowing from my arm into the tablet, and the world began to distort before my eyes. The air itself seemed to swirl strangely for a moment. When this passed, the thick wall of trees and plants in front of me had disappeared, leaving a stone building in its place. Whoa! I've never seen an enchantment like this, said Alenelius, staring at the structure in astonishment. It wasn't anything I'd seen before either, but the way the tablet had sucked mana out of me was familiar. The thing was probably an oversized stationary magical implement. If we broke it in half, we'd probably find a bunch of complex magic circles etched inside. Still, this incantation struck me as a dragon god original. What with all the references to various dragons. That holy dragon emperor Sharad guy was one of the 5 dragon generals from the old stories, right? This incantation seemed to be incomplete, given that it lacked the name of the spell itself. But if you had the entire thing, maybe it would allow you to imitate the power of this tablet and dispel magical barriers freely. It seemed disturbingly plausible. Let's get going then. All right. I kind of wanted to uproot this tablet and take it home with me, but that seemed like the sort of thing that might get me murdered by Orsted. I'd had enough of that for one lifetime. The building before us was a squat single-story structure. Vines of ivy ran along its walls, and there were places where the stones had crumbled away over the years. The place looks like a pretty typical ancient ruin, doesn't it? I've seen a few labyrinths with entrances that looked a bit like this. Alinalise. Oh, right, you don't have any experience with labyrinths, do you, Rudius? Nope, I've explored some old ruins and such, but not an actual labyrinth. In that case, make sure you follow closely behind me. Only step where I do. Sure, I can do that, but, I don't think this place is a labyrinth, is it? It's better to be safe than sorry. Fair enough. There might be traps in here for all we know. Still, Linelise wasn't a rogue or anything. She was very capable of finding. Was she even capable of finding traps? Just to be on the safe side, I activated my Eye of Foresight. It wasn't much of an advanced warning system, but it might help me cope a little better with any sudden ambushes. Okay then, Rudius, let's go. Be ready to cover me if things turn ugly. Got it. Cautiously, Alinalise and I stepped inside the stone ruin together. The interior was also made of stone. Here and there, you could see vines or tree roots poking through the walls. A classic forest ruins situation, basically. It wasn't that large. Why do I hear the Forest Temple theme from Ocarina of Time in my head right now? You know? Anybody else getting that vibe? Boo-doo, 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 boo-doo. It wasn't that large a structure, though. In fact, it looked like there were only 4 rooms. We moved through them slowly, making sure to investigate every corner. The 2 rooms nearest the entrance were completely empty spaces, about 7 square meters in size. The third had a small closet in one corner. When we opened the door, we found winter clothing in a man's size stored inside. These clearly hadn't been sitting here for decades. Somebody had changed their clothes here relatively recently. And by somebody, I mean Orsted. The teleportation circle was supposedly going to drop us in the middle of a desert, and this region was blanketed in heavy snows for a good part of the year. I had to imagine it would be hard to buy appropriate clothing for that weather in Begarit, which was probably why he'd left these here for us for his next visit. If I'd known we could leave things behind like this, I would have carried a little more luggage. There's no point crying over spilled milk, though. What's the matter? Is there some reason you're staring at these clothes? Nah, just wondering if there's anything we should leave behind for our return trip. I don't think so. We'd basically be throwing supplies away if we left them here. To be sure, the food we had with us wasn't going to stay edible if we left it sitting here for months. Barrier or no barrier, there were probably bugs in here. Let's be on our way then, said Linley's, turning around toward the exit. Right. In the 4th and final room, we found a set of stairs leading down into darkness. Oh my, now this looks suspicious. Linley scrutinized the area around the stairs and checked every corner of the room like an FPS player clearing an area. I guess staircases were popular places to set traps. Saying yes, deserts can get very cold, but typically they don't get like Arctic cold. Typically. Okay then, I think we're all right. In the end, though, she didn't find anything. I wasn't too surprised. If someone wanted to trap this place, they'd probably have put a few in the entrance, too. I'll head down first. Watch my back, Rudius. Got it. Antarctica isn't a desert, technically. It's tundra. Antarctica is technically a tundra, not a desert. There's a difference. Anyway. I just got done picking this stuff out of my mouth, and what do? I go and pop another piece of popcorn. Idiot. Idiot, idiot, idiot. Hmm. Alenelise took the stairs down very slowly and carefully. I made sure to follow exactly in her footsteps. Oddly, the ruins didn't get any darker as we descended. Hmm. The reason for this became clear when we reached the bottom of the stairs. Well, there it is. There was a huge magic circle on the floor in front of us, as big as one of the rooms upstairs. In size, at least, it was comparable to the one I'd been trapped in while in the royal palace of Sharon, and it was emanating a steady bluish white light. Hmm. Uh, sorry. This would be the teleportation circle, then? I'd have to assume so, yes. Just to be sure, I took Nanahoshi's journal from my bag and reviewed her notes. The thing in front of her looked very similar to her sketch of a two-way teleporting circle. There were some minor differences, but all the major features were there. All we had to do was step into this thing, and we should theoretically find ourselves in the Beggarid continent. Alenelise, however, seemed to be in no hurry to try it out. She was staring at the magic circle with a hesitant expression on her face. Something the matter, Alenelise? I have some rather painful memories involving teleportation, that's all. Painful memories? What was she talking about? Some hidden incident from her days as an adventurer? Yeah, well, you're not the only one. Ah, I suppose not. Linley shook her head and looked at the magic circle again. This time, there was a grimly determined expression on her face. If this thing drops us in the middle of the ocean, I added helpfully, let's make sure Nanahoshi regrets it. All right, said Linley. I'll hold you down. I'll hold her down while you jam it in. Can we go with something less sexual? Sexual? I didn't specify what you'd be jamming into where, dear. You could always just stick a finger into her nose or something. You've got a rather dirty mind. Sticking your finger into a girl's nose still sounds kind of sexual to me, actually. Does it really? I'll have to see if Cliff wants to try it later. Don't blame me if he takes you up on that. Smiling, Alenelise took me by the hand. Her grip was strong despite her slender fingers. This was the hand of an adventurer. It was also a little warm and sweaty, and it made my heart start to beat a little faster. Of course, I had Sylphie and Alenelise had Cliff. If something happened between us, we'd both be committing adultery. And it wasn't like we had feelings for each other in that sense, anyway. I hope you're not misunderstanding, Rudius. It's important for us to be in physical contact when we teleport, if we want to make sure it keeps us together. Oh, right, yeah. Sorry about that. Whoops, that's kind of cringeworthy. I wasn't a virgin anymore, so I had no excuse to keep making these kinds of mistakes. There I go again, seducing my granddaughter's husband without even trying to. Alenelise sighed. Simply criminal to be this beautiful, I suppose. Yeah, better atone for your misdeeds by filing for divorce. Hey, come on. You're just being rude. That was better. If we turned the awkwardness into a joke, it diffused the sexual tension. Alenelise really knew how to handle these sorts of situations. Okay, then. Shall we go? Let's do it. The two of us stepped into the teleportation circle together. I just needed to do that. Okay. Stop right there, Paul. It's the end of the chapter, and we're now going to do all those exercises. But, Paul, if you wait until I start up chapter 10, that's right, chapter 10, we've got one more chapter to go. When I start reading chapter 10, just dump all those exercises on me again if you want. All right. So let's tally up the exercises. 30 crunches, 20 push ups, 20 squats, 20 jumping jacks, 20 Russian twists. All right. Good with all that. Go. Jumping jacks. go. 20 squats. 20 squats. Right. There we go. 1, 2. And 20. All right. Up. Those heel touches in. Okay, 20. Crunches 30. Ah. Okay. 30 sit-ups. Or crunches, rather. Ah. 20 push-ups. There we go. 20. Run to the bathroom real quick. Alrighty. Okay. All right, last chapter of the night. Probably got about an hour to go before we finish. This is going to be a long chapter, so we'll just get to it. Whew. Chapter 10, Natural Predator. Teleporting felt a bit like snapping awake out of a doze. Maybe I'd actually lost consciousness for a moment? Looking beside me, I saw Linalise was just as startled. I guess we're here, she said after a moment. Well, maybe. We were still standing in a stone ruin, just as we had been before, and the chamber didn't look particularly different at first glance. After a few seconds, though, I started to notice small piles of sand in the corners and a lack of vines on the walls. The stone was tinged a slightly browner color, too. We'd been teleported somewhere, all right. I stepped gingerly out of the magic circle. My body seemed to be functioning normally. I had my belongings, too, and I hadn't swapped minds with Linalise or anything. Once we stepped completely out of the teleporter, it began to emit that bluish-white light again. Apparently, it was ready and waiting for us to return to the other side. That was convenient and all, but I didn't see any magic crystals powering this thing. How exactly was it getting the mana that it needed? Maybe it had a power source buried under the floor? Well, if it was somehow absorbing mana from the air around it. If there was a way to do that, I really wanted to know. Oh, wait. We should check to make sure we can get back to the other side, right? Yes, that seems prudent, yes. This was supposedly a two-way teleporter, but we had no way of knowing if it worked properly or had any limitations. This out-of-breath shit is just for the birds. Let me get that double chin taken care of. I got a little bit of one. There's like a little bit of goblet under there. Anyway. If we'd taken a one-way trip out here, we'd need to hoof it back home the hard way. That would put an end to my plan to make it back before Sylphie gave birth. I guess I'll go. If I'm not back in a few minutes, you can go on without me, said Linalise, pushing me back gently. I don't fancy the idea of telling Paul that you disappeared because of a malfunctioning teleporter. Well, all right. I'll leave it to you. It didn't matter that much either way at this point. I wasn't even sure we were on the right continent yet, for one thing. Okay, sit tight. Linalise hopped back into the magic circle and abruptly disappeared. I caught a brief glimpse of her being sucked down into the floor. This is my first time actually seeing someone get teleported, come to think of it. Did these things move through the ground somewhere? For the moment, there wasn't much to do but wait. I trusted Nanahoshi's memory, and from what she said, you'd need some magic incantation or special technique to use these things properly. There was a chance Orsted had used some sort of magical implement, but we'd make out here easily enough. I wanted to think the return trip would be just as smooth. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. She's sure taking her time, Just as I was beginning to get concerned, Linalise finally showed up again. It was like watching the teleport happening in reverse. She popped up out of the floor in the fraction of a second. She looked a bit woozy for a moment, then nodded. She met my gaze. We're all right, Rudius. It works just fine. Really? I was starting to get worried. You took longer than I expected. What? I didn't spend more than a few seconds on the other side. The teleportation process wasn't literally instant then. But a few minutes to take a trip halfway across the world wasn't a bad deal. It sounded like we were looking at maybe 7 minutes of lag per trip. Come to think of it, I'd heard something about Photoan displacement incident that seemed relevant. There had supposedly been an odd delay between the disappearances and when people reappeared elsewhere. It was Sylphie who Was it Sylvie who told me that? Teleportation might be a rapid means of travel, but it wasn't instantaneous. Maybe it was more like a boson jump. Well, no big deal. You made it back, and that's what matters. I suppose so. If these things were too dangerous, Orsted wouldn't be using them, and we'd at least confirm that we could go back. I said go back, but the sentence says get back home. Shall we be on our way then? Feeling somewhat reassured, I made my way over to the stone stairs leading upward. The instant we reached the first floor, I noticed a sharp increase in the temperature. The air was brutally hot. It didn't feel too humid, at least, which made sense if we were in the middle of a desert, like we were supposed to be. The first floor looked virtually identical to the ruin we'd left behind in the forest. The main difference was the sand carpeting the floors and the lack of vegetation on the walls. I noticed a few footprints here and there. Those were Orsted's, presumably. If we bumped into each other, I'd have to grovel at his feet faster than he could kill me. There were 4 rooms here as well, and the layout was identical. In one of them, however, we found a few thick white capes and water canteens. More of Orsted's possessions, presumably. What should we do about our footsteps? Think I could erase them? Or think I should erase them? Are you worried about that Orsted person? I think it's rather unlikely that we'll run into him. True, but I was still kind of scared. Maybe I should leave behind a message? Tell him Nanahoshi had told me about this place and I was only using it because of my family emergency, promise to keep it secret, and beg him not to be angry with me? Then again, there was no telling when he'd even be here next. He might never find out we'd been here in the first place, in which case, leaving a letter would just be asking for trouble. After a few moments, I decided not to bother. We took some time to look through the ruin just in case. But there wasn't anything else of note. Orsted wasn't lurking on the premises either, of course. After exploring the ruin thoroughly, we set foot outside for the first time. It was hot out there. Very hot. The word hot was kind of inadequate. To be honest, the wind actually hurt my face. All I saw in front of me was a sea of rolling sand dunes. It looked like one of the pictures I'd seen of the Sahara back in my previous life. The sun was already starting to set. Wasn't it better to travel at night in the desert, though? Wait, no, maybe it was more dangerous because the temperatures would drop below freezing? Not that things necessarily work the same in this world. I seem to remember that desert-dwelling monsters were more active at night. If we wandered around in the dark and got ambushed, things could get dicey. What do you think we should do, Elise? I asked. We won't get far before the sun sets if we set out now. It's a little early, but I think we ought to take the chance to rest with a roof over our heads. We ended up deciding to spend the night in the ruins. The night proved just as frigid as I'd feared. I'd gotten used to cold up in the north, but the rapid way the temperature shifted here made it harder to endure. We were okay for the moment since we had thick stone walls to shelter behind, but we'd have to think of how to stay warm when we were camping outdoors. Maybe I could maybe I could make us some temporary shelter with magic. Earth Fortress was a nice spell for that, but you had to keep feeding it mana or it would crumble. If I tinkered with it a little, maybe I could create a simple igloo-style structure that would hold itself together. Then we could make a fire inside to warm ourselves up. Yeah, that seemed like a plan. For tonight, though, we decided to just wrap ourselves up in our sleeping bags on the floor. I took some time to recharge Lisa's magical implement before returning it. Yeah. This involved putting both my hands on the diaper to channel mana into it. I felt like a bit of an idiot, to be honest. Rudius, Lisa muttered, if you find yourself running out of mana, you can put off recharging this thing for a while. But if I stop feeding it mana, you won't be able to contain yourself, right? Your magic is going to be crucial every time we enter combat. We have to prioritize your fighting ability. The monsters on the Begarit continent weren't, on average, as fierce as those in the Demon continent, but some were supposedly of comparable strength. Letting down our guard might prove fatal. Don't worry about it. This isn't much of a strain on my mana supply, honestly. Really? I swear, your mana's like a bottomless well. Kind of like your sex drive. Oh, I wouldn't say I'm that horny, dear. If I slacked off on filling this thing up with mana and Alinalise went into seductress mode, we'd be in trouble. I probably wouldn't be able to resist if she attacked me. There were too many convenient excuses available. Just this once. It'll be our little secret. I tried to stop her, but she forced the issue. And if I gave in to that kind of pressure, it might end up ruining our lives. I mean, what if she got pregnant? Cliff would hate me for the rest of his life, and Sophie might never forgive me either, not to mention what my little sisters might think. I just couldn't imagine a single good thing coming of me sleeping with Alinalise. If we really couldn't stop ourselves, maybe I could at least convince her to stop at oral. No, I shouldn't even be thinking like that. It was obviously a little I was obviously a little backed up myself at this point. I'd been spending a lot of time over the last week with my arms wrapped around Alinalise. We hadn't done anything remotely sexual, but you couldn't blame a guy for getting a little horny. I'd have to see to my own needs tonight when I was on guard duty or something. Well, let's go to sleep, shall we? I imagine we'll be moving through this desert for some time, so we ought to be saving our strength. Yeah, you're right. Much as I wanted to conserve my energy, though, I needed to expend some tonight. Sometimes it isn't easy being a man. Later that night, as I was lying inside the ruins, a sweet smell wafted through the air. Instantly, I felt my heart start pounding in my chest. Opening my eyes, I saw Alinalise grimacing in her sleep with a sword clutched in her arms. I found myself studying her pale neck and slender hands. Her face looked a bit like a more grown-up version of Sylphie's. She was tall and willowy, too. Especially below the waist, her figure was about as perfect as I'd ever seen. And wasn't she supposedly really, really good in the sack, too? All of a sudden, my log had grown into a towering oak, and my thoughts were clouded with desire. Alinalise wriggled around in her sleep. Her blanket slipped off, and I got a good look at her thighs and tight leather shorts. The woman had a nice butt. I wanted to give it a squeeze. Without consciously meaning to, I reached out. I wanted to touch her very, very badly. My fingers reached her thighs. They really were amazingly slender. Alinalise let out a little sound and parted her legs slightly. Is she trying to seduce me or what? It felt increasingly impossible for me to stop myself. Why did it matter anyway? We could make it a one-time thing. She wasn't going to refuse me. She'd keep it to herself. I couldn't be, if she'd keep it to herself, it wouldn't be a problem. Cliff. But then she murmured that name in her sleep and I came to my senses. Turning around, I crawled out of the room on all fours, then fled outside the building entirely. I thought I was still okay for now, but I'd obviously been neglecting my body's needs for way too long. I'd nearly gotten carried away by a momentary surge of lust. It was past time for me to blow off some steam, if you know what I mean. Sitting down on top of a nearby sand dune, I started to lower my pants and then heard a noise. I wasn't alone out there. Had Alinalise followed me outside? Looking around me, I spotted a very sexy woman standing not too far away. It was freezing cold out here, but she was dressed up like a dancing girl. Her clothes were skimpy. Her clothes were skimpy enough that they'd probably be transparent in the light of day. She had short, curly hair, probably black in color. It was hard to make out her skin tone in the darkness, but her body shone palely against the inky sky. More importantly, she had a nice body. Curves in all the right places, you know? She made Alinalise look like a plank of wood. The woman put a finger to her mouth and licked it seductively. I found myself staring, transfixed at her lips. Slowly, patiently, she walked over to me. And then she crouched down, slowly spreading her legs apart. The sweet smell I'd caught a whiff of earlier flooded into the air. Far more powerful than before. It hit me like a tidal wave. I swallowed loudly. There was something warm running down my chin. When I touched my face, I found I had a nosebleed. The woman reached out her hand invitingly to me. I accepted and let her draw me forward unto Rudius! In that instant, there was a shout from inside the ruins. The woman jumped back. A split second later, Alinalise slashed her sword through the air where she'd been. Before I could react, Alinalise had positioned herself between me and my seductress. Get a hold of yourself, stupid! She cried. Huh? I didn't know how to react, but Alinalise was already raising her shield and charging at the woman. The woman let out a high-pitched shriek and her nails grew to an unnatural length. Her body itself was changing shape. Fully formed wings burst from her back and she beat them fiercely, trying to lift off the ground. Alenalise was already on her. Swinging her shield sharply into the woman's face, she sent her crashing to the ground, and once she had the thrashing woman pinned it in place with her foot, she stabbed her sword down. The woman let out one final eerie cry, but Alenalise just pushed the blade deeper. After a moment, she jumped back. The woman twitched and spasmed a few times, but soon stopped moving. She was dead. Huh? I looked on in a state of shock. My mind didn't want to make sense of these events, and my little guy still hadn't gone back to normal yet. The hell? What just happened? I sat there stupefied. Alenalise turned around and slapped me in the face. Wake up already! That thing was a succubus! Huh? A succubus? Wait, really? That dead thing lying on the ground had looked like a normal woman to me, albeit one with giant bat wings and weirdly long claws. Oh, now that I looked more closely, her skin was actually bright blue and her face wasn't quite human either. She did have a really nice body, though. Before she died, at least, maybe I could cop a feel? Yes, this is the first one I've seen, but I'm positive, Alenalise said. I guess that foul stench they omit wasn't just an urban legend. What foul stench? It had struck me as a nice fragrance, actually, and kind of arousing. But anyway, I found myself staring at Alenalise again. She didn't have much of a chest, but her face was gorgeous, and her legs were shapely, and that butt— My God! Alenalise? You've got a really nice body, you know. What? Rudius? Pull yourself together, please? It was no big deal, right? The woman loved sleeping around. If I complimented her enough, she'd let me in her pants. You know, I've always dreamed about making love to a girl like you. I'll tell Sylphie if you keep this up. Hey, what she doesn't know can't hurt her. Rising to my feet, I started to walk slowly toward Alenalise. She raised her shield and backed away from me. Damn, that's right, she muttered. Succubi can bewitch men, can't they? Come on, babe, let's have some fun. Alenalise frowned, then sighed. And then smacked her shield into my face. I fell back so hard onto the sand, bright lights flashing before my eyes. That didn't matter, though. I had more important things to worry about, like having sex with Alenalise. Come on, babe, you won't regret it. Oh, good Lord, Rudius. Use detoxification magic on yourself and keep using it until you count to 10. Detoxification magic? If I do that, will you let me screw you? We'll figure that out later. Just do it, all right? Panting loudly, I started to cast detoxification spells, beginning with the most basic and working my way up to the intermediate incantations. After I'd completed a few of those, though, my body suddenly felt a lot lighter. Huh? It was as if the fog inside my head had lifted all at once. My lower body was still a little overactive, but my desperate need for sex was already fading away. I looked over at Alenalise. She was an attractive woman, to be sure, but those were my only thoughts. I did hear that the scent of the succubus has the ability to drive men out of their minds. I see that part was true as well. Alenalise slowly sheathed her sword, then folded her arms with a sigh. Good grief. What was I even doing until a moment ago? I searched my memory for the words I'd spoken over the last few minutes. Shit. Let's go back to sleep, shall we? And do try to be a little more careful next time. Alenalise was already turning around to return to the ruins. Fidgeting awkwardly in embarrassment, I called out to her, Miss Alenalise? I'm very sorry about all that. Alenalise looked back at me suspiciously, then grinned in amusement at the look on my face. What was that line again? I've always dreamed of making love to a girl like you. I could feel my face heating up. It wasn't my fault. The succubus made me do it. Come on, babe. You won't regret it. Ugh! God damn it. This was seriously humiliating. Smirking, Alenalise walked over to me and thumped me on the head. It's all right. I understand. The thing has that effect on people, you know? It's hardly your fault. I won't tell Sylphie or Paul about this. You're a saint, Alenalise. Just try not to trust me too blindly, all right? I can control myself for the moment, but my curse will only go stronger with time. At some point, I won't be able to hold back. Yeah, okay. If it happens, it happens. No, stupid! You're supposed to stop me if the time comes to that. Right, right! Shaking her head, Alenalise smiled gently. I guess I'll be going to sleep then. You can stay on guard for now, please. And make sure you burn that body. Got it! With that, she walked back inside the ruin. I still couldn't help feeling guilty about the way I'd treated her, but there wasn't much I could do about it now. I needed to burn the succubus's body and bury its bones. Up close, it wasn't quite as attractive. Its features were like a bat-like. Its features were kind of bat-like, actually. I guess it looked human enough if you squinted, but I couldn't understand why I'd been so turned on by it before. I should have sworn it. I could have sworn it looked like a beautiful girl at first. Maybe it only revealed its real form when its true nature was exposed, like vampires in horror movies. Still, I hadn't been imagining that figure. The creature's body was voluptuous, all right. Maybe that was the real problem. From the neck down, it was a much bustier version of a Linolise with wings. Okay, let's try to get our mind off this subject. This had been a very close call. If a Linolise hadn't come leaping out in the nick of time, what would have become of me? Maybe this thing would have taken me by the hand, lured me out somewhere, and sucked the life right out of me. Damn it! I've still got a bad case of blue balls. Just another reason to resent this thing. At this rate, I really might throw myself on a Linolase before too long. Maybe I should relieve myself before I go back in there. Keeping an eye out for succubi, of course. It was only our first night in the Begarit continent, and this journey was already proving to be a real challenge. And that's it. There we go. Holy shit, that was a lot quicker than I thought it would be. That is 10 chapters down. We are at chapter 11. Bankruptcy. We stopped on bankruptcy. All right, gang. I think next week is going to be our last week. And so I just need to do 10 of everything. So really quickly, push-ups, crunches, jumping jacks. Let's get it out of the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Okay, 10. There we go, 10. Yeah. So there we go, gang. Whew. What'd y'all think of the story this time around? Holy cow. Pretty good stuff. Whew. It's about 7:30. So go ahead and post your thoughts on the 4 chapters we read today in the comments in the chat. Let me know. I'll be right back. All right. It depends. Okay. Forward to seeing what it's building up to. And yes. Ah, good. Bonk cures horny confirmed. Depends. Masochists get horny. Oh, gosh. T.O. from Arthur. Oh, God. Rudius remembered that Eris being rough during their first time excited him too. Oh, yeah, that's also true. All right, guys. Seems like you had some thoughts. Good to see. Good to see. But yeah, man, we flew through this. Good stuff. Good stuff. We flew through it. I am happy about that. Well, gang, that last chapter went a lot quicker than I thought it would, but we are now 70% through this book. I'm thinking if things go right next week, we will be finishing volume 11 and moving on to 12. So right here we have desert ecosystem, traversing the sands, bazaar, and the warriors of the desert, followed by Norn in the Millis Church. That is what we're doing here. So looks like we're all good on how that goes. But that having been said, guys, thank you so much for coming by and hanging out with us. We really, really appreciate it. Of course, as always, if you would do me a giant favor and go check out, if you haven't been here before, go and check out our YouTube channel. It should be down below. But yeah, youtube.com/FatDogStudios, spelled the same way as this channel. It's just this simple. We post a lot of content on there, and maybe consider giving our Patreon a try. That having been said, guys, thank you so much for all your work. We really, really appreciate it, and I will see you either tomorrow or Monday for What the Fell. We will be jumping back into Destiny 2 and starting The Witch Queen. So there we go. You guys have a wonderful night, and I'll see you all again later. Bye-bye for now.